The Book of Heaven. Volume 2. Luisa writes out of obedience. On the order of my confessor, on this 28th day of February of the year 1899, I begin to write what is happening day after day between our Lord and me. In truth, I feel a very great reluctance to do so. The effort it takes me is so great that only the Lord can know how tortured my soul is. O holy obedience, your bond is so powerful that only you can persuade me to move forward. And, overtaking the almost impassable mountains of my repugnances, you bind me to the will of God and the confessor. O my holy bridegroom, the greater my sacrifice, the more I need your help. I don't ask you anything except that you hold me in your arms and support me. With your help, I will be able to tell only the truth. Only for your glory and for my greatest confusion. This morning, since the confessor was celebrating Mass, I was able to receive communion. My mind was in a sea of confusion because of what the confessor asked me to do, to write down everything that happens in my heart. Upon receiving Jesus, I began to speak to him of my great sorrow, my inadequacies, and many other things. However, Jesus did not seem to be interested in my suffering and said nothing. A light lit my mind and I thought, maybe it's because of me that Jesus doesn't manifest himself as usual. So, with all my heart, I said to him, "Oh, please, my Lord and my all, do not be indifferent to me. For you break my heart with pain. If it's because of the writing, so be it. Even if I have to sacrifice my life there, I promise to do it." Then Jesus changed his attitude and said to me gently, "What do you fear? Haven't I always assisted you before? My light will envelop you entirely and you will be able to manifest it." While Jesus was talking to me, I saw the confessor by his side. Jesus said to him, "Everything you do goes all the way to heaven. Your steps, your words and your actions reach me. With what purity should you act? If your actions are pure, that is, made for me, I make it my delight's end. I feel them surrounding me like so many messengers that make me think of you continuously. But if they are made for earthly and vile motives, I am bothered by them." While he was saying this, he took the hands of the confessor and, raising them to heaven, he said, "Let your eyes always be turned upwards. You are from heaven, work for heaven." These words of Jesus led me to think that, if this is done, everything happens for us as when one person leaves their home to move into another. What does it do? First, she transfers all her belongings there, and then she goes there herself. In the same way, we first send our works to heaven in order to prepare a place for ourselves. And, at the time set by God, we go there ourselves. Oh! What a wonderful procession our works will make us! As I looked at the confessor, I remembered that he had asked me to write about faith according to what Jesus taught me. I was thinking about this when, suddenly, the Lord drew me so strongly to him that I felt that I was leaving my body to join him in the vault of heaven. He said to me, "Faith is God." These words emitted such an intense light that it seems to me impossible to explain them, however, I will do my best. I understood that faith is God himself. As material nourishment gives life to the body so that it does not die, faith gives life to the soul. Without faith, the soul is dead. Faith vivifies, sanctifies, and spiritualizes man. It helps him keep his eyes fixed on the Supreme Being, so that he learns nothing of things from this world except through God. Oh! The happiness of the soul that lives in faith! Its flight is always towards the sky. She always sees herself in God. When the trial comes, her faith lifts her up to God and she says to herself, "Oh! I will be all the happier and richer in heaven." The things of the earth bore her, she hates them and tramples on them. The soul filled with faith resembles a person rich in millions, possessing vast kingdoms and to whom someone would like to offer a penny. What would that person say? Would she not be insulted? Would she not throw that penny in the face of the person who called her out? What if that penny was covered in mud like the things of this world and we just wanted to lend it to him? Then the person would say, I possess immense riches and you dare to offer me your miserable muddy penny. And, moreover, for a time only. It would refuse the offer immediately. This is the attitude of the soul of faith towards the goods of this world. Now back to the idea of food. When a person absorbs food, his body is not only raised, but the absorbed substance is transformed into his body. So it is with the soul that lives in faith. By nourishing oneself with God, it absorbs the substance of God. And, as a result, she looks more and more like Him. She is transformed into Him. Since God is holy, the soul that lives in faith becomes holy. Since God is powerful, the soul becomes powerful. Since God is wise, strong, and just, the soul becomes wise, strong, and just. This is the case for all the attributes of God. In short, the soul becomes a little God. Oh! How blessed this soul is on earth and will be even more so in heaven. I also understood that the words I will marry you in faith that the Lord addresses to His beloved souls mean that in mystical marriage, the Lord endows the soul with its own virtues. It looks like what happens to two spouses. By pooling their property, the property of one is no longer distinct from that of the other. Both are owners. In our case, however, the soul is poor and all its possessions come from the Lord. Faith is like a king in the middle of his court. All other virtues surround and serve her. Without faith, the other virtues are lifeless. It seems to me that God communicates the faith to man in two ways. First by baptism and then, by releasing into the soul a particle of its substance, which gives it the gift to work miracles, to raise the dead, to heal the sick, to stop the sun, etc. O. Sile monde avec la foi, la terre serait transformée en un paradis terrestre. O. Comme est sublime l'envol de l'âme qui s'exerce à la vertu de foi. Elle agit comme ces petits oiseaux timides qui par crainte des chasseurs ou des pigeons font leur nid au sommet des arbres ou dans des endroits élevés. When they are hungry, they go down to get their food. Then they immediately return to their nest. The most cautious do not even eat on the ground. For safety, they transport their beaks to their nest where they swallow their food. The soul that lives by faith is embarrassed by the goods of this world. And, for fear of being drawn to them, she doesn't even look at them. His abode is higher, beyond the things of the earth. Especially in the wounds of Jesus Christ. In the hollow of these holy wounds, she groans, cries, prays and suffers with her husband Jesus at the sight of the misery in which humanity lies. While the soul lives in the wounds of Jesus, Jesus gives her a piece of her virtues for her to appropriate. However, even though she recognizes these virtues as her own, she knows that in reality they come from the Lord. It happens to this soul what happens to a person who receives a gift. What does it do? She accepts it and becomes its owner. But, every time she looks at him, she thinks to herself, this object is mine, but it is this person who gave it to me. So it is for the soul that the Lord transforms into His image by communicating to him a particle of His divine being. Since this soul hates sin, she has compassion for other souls and she prays for those who are heading towards the precipice. She unites herself with Jesus Christ and offers herself as a victim, in order to appease divine justice and to save creatures the punishments they deserve. If the sacrifice of His life is necessary, oh! With what joy she will do it, if only for the salvation of one soul. When the confessor asked me to explain to him how I perceived God, I told him that it was impossible for me to answer his question. In the evening, my sweet Jesus appeared to me and almost reproached me because of my refusal. Then he passed two very bright rays through me. By the first, I understood intellectually that faith is God and God is faith. This is how, above, I was able to try to say something about faith. Now, following the second ray. I will try to explain how I perceive God. When I am out of my body and in the heights of heaven, I feel like I see God as inside a light. God seems to be this light himself. In this light are found beauty, strength, wisdom, immensity, infinite height and depth. God is present even in the air we breathe. Thus, we breathe it and we can make it our own life. Nothing escapes God and nothing can escape him. This light seems to be completely voice, although it does not speak, it seems to be completely action, despite the fact that it is always at rest. It is everywhere, despite having its own center. O God, how incomprehensible you are! I see you, I feel your presence, you are my life and you lock yourself in me, but you remain immense and lose nothing of yourself. I really feel like I'm stuttering and not saying anything worthwhile about God. To express myself in human words, I will say that I see reflections of God everywhere in creation. In some places, these reflections are beauty. To others, they are perfume. To others, they are light, especially in the sun. The sun seems to me to be particularly representative of God. I see God as hidden within this sphere which is the king of all the stars. What is the sun? Nothing but a globe of fire. This globe is unique but its rays are multiple. The globe represents God and his rays, the infinite attributes of God. The sun is at the same time fire, light, and heat. The most holy Trinity is thus represented by the sun. The fire representing the Father. The light, the Son and warmth, the Holy Spirit. Although the sun is fire, light, and heat, it is one. Just as in the sun fire cannot be separated from light and heat. Thus the power of the Father, that of the Son and that of the Holy Spirit are inseparable. It is inconceivable that the Father takes precedence over the Son and the Holy Spirit, or vice versa. For all three have the same eternal origin. Just as sunlight diffuses everywhere, God is present everywhere by his immensity. However, the comparison with the sun here is flawed. Since the sun cannot reach the places where its light cannot penetrate, while God is present absolutely everywhere. God is pure spirit. The sun also adjusts to this aspect of God. Since its rays penetrate everywhere while no one can grasp them. Like the sun, which is in no way affected by the ugliness of the objects it can illuminate, God sees all the iniquities of men, while remaining perfectly pure, holy, and immaculate. The sun spreads its light on fire but does not burn, on the sea and rivers, but does not drown. It illuminates everything, fertilizes everything, gives life to everything by its warmth, but it loses nothing of its light or its heat. Despite all the good he does to creatures, he needs no one and always remains the same, majestic, brilliant, and unchanging. Oh! How easy it is to see the divine attributes through the sun. By its immensity, God is present in the fire but does not consume himself. It is present in the sea but does not drown. It is present under our footsteps but is not crushed. He gives to all without getting poorer and needs no one. He sees everything and hears everything. He knows every fiber of our hearts and every one of our thoughts, although, being pure mind, he has neither eyes nor ears. Man can deprive himself of sunlight and its beneficial effects. But it does not affect the sun in any way. All the evil resulting from this deprivation falls on man, without the sun being affected in the slightest. While sinning, the sinner distances himself from God and thus loses the enjoyment of his beneficial presence. But it does not affect God in any way. Evil returns to the sinner. The roundness of the sun symbolizes the eternity of God, which has no beginning or end. The sunlight is so intense that you can't fix it for long without being dazzled. If the sun were to approach men, they would be reduced to ashes. This is the case with the divine sun. No created spirit can penetrate it. If one tried to do so, one would be dazzled and confused. If, while we still inhabit our mortal body, the divine sun wanted to show us all his love, we would be reduced to ashes. In short, God sows reflections of Himself in all creation. This creates in us the impression of seeing and touching Him. Thus, we are continually joined by Him. After the Lord told me the words, "Faith is God," I asked Him, "Jesus, do you love me?" He replied, "And you, do you love me?" I repeat, "Yes, Lord, and you know that without you, I feel like there's no life in me." Jesus continued, "So you love me and I love you. So, let's love each other and always stay together." Thus ended our meeting. By the time the morning ended, who could say all that my mind has grasped about the Divine Son? I feel like I see and touch Him everywhere. I feel clothed in it, inside and out. However, even though I know some things about God, as soon as I see Him, I feel like I haven't understood anything. Worse still, I seem to have said nothing but nonsense. I hope that Jesus will forgive me for all my nonsense. I was in my usual state when my kind Jesus was embittered and afflicted. He told me, "My daughter, my righteousness has become too heavy and the offenses I receive from men are so numerous that I can no longer bear them. Thus, the scythe of death will soon have much to reap, either suddenly or through diseases. The punishments I will send will be so numerous that they will constitute a kind of judgment. I cannot say how many punishments He showed me and how terrified I was of them. The pain I feel is so great that I find it better to be silent. But, since obedience requires it, I continue. I thought I saw streets strewn with human flesh. The blood-flooded ground and several cities besieged by enemies who did not even spare the children. It looked like furies out of hell, having no respect for priests or churches. The Lord seemed to be sending a chastisement from heaven. I don't know what it was. It seemed to me that all of us were going to receive a fatal blow, and that some would die while others would recover. I have also seen plants die and many other misfortunes affect the harvest. Oh, my God! What a pain to see these things and be forced to talk about them. Ah! Lord, calm down. I hope that your blood and wounds can heal us. Rather, pour out your chastisements on the sinner that I am, for I deserve them. Or take me and do with me what you want. But as long as I live, I will do everything to oppose these punishments." This morning, my beloved Jesus showed Himself in a stern aspect and not full of gentleness and affability as usual. My mind was in a sea of confusion and my soul annihilated. Especially because of the punishments that Jesus had shown me in recent days. Seeing Jesus in this state, I did not dare to speak to Him. We looked at each other in silence. Oh my God, what suffering! Suddenly, I also saw the confessor and, sending me a ray of intellectual light. Jesus said, "Charity. Charity is nothing but an outpouring of the divine being on all creation which all of us speak of my love for men and invite them to love me. For example, the smallest flower in the field said to the man, 'See, by my delicate perfume.' Always looking to the sky, I pay homage to our Creator. You too, may your actions be fragrant, pure, and holy. Do not offend our Creator by afflicting Him with the bad smell of evil deeds. O man, please do not be foolish in always looking at the earth. Instead, look to the sky. Your destiny, your homeland, is up there. There is our Creator and He is waiting for you. The water that flows continuously before the eyes of men says to them, 'Look, I come from the night and I have to sink and run until I return to where I came from.' You too, O man, run, but run to the bosom of God from where you come. Oh! Please do not run on the wrong paths, those that lead to the precipice. Otherwise, woe to you. Even the wildest animals tell man. See, O man, how fierce you must be towards all that is not God. When someone approaches us, we so fear with our roars, so that no one dares to approach us any more and come to disturb our loneliness. You too. When the stench of earthly things, that is, of your violent passions, risk of falling into the abyss of sin, you can ward off any danger by the roar of your prayers and by fleeing the opportunities of sin. And so on for all the other creatures. With one voice, they say to each other and repeat to man. See, O man, our Creator created us out of love for you, we are all at your service. So don't be ungrateful. Please, love. We repeat it to you, love. Love our Creator. Then my kind Jesus said to me, all I desire, it is that you love God and that you love your neighbor out of love for God. See how much I have loved men, they who are so ungrateful. How do you want me not to chastise them? At that moment, I thought I saw a terrible hailstorm and a great earthquake causing great damage, to the point of destroying plants and people. Then, soul filled with bitterness, I said to Jesus, my ever-kind Jesus, why are you so outraged? If men are ungrateful, it is not so much out of malice as out of weakness. Ah! If they knew you only a little, how humble and thrilling they would be with love for you. Please calm down. In particular, spare my city Corrado and my loved ones. While I was saying this, I understood that something was still going to happen in Corrado, but that it would be little compared to what was going to happen in other cities. This morning, as I carried me with him, my most sweet Jesus made me see the multitude of sins that are committed on earth. It is impossible for me to describe them because they are so horrible and numerous. In the air, I could see a huge star whose center contained black fire and blood. It was so horrible to see that it would be better to die than to live in such sad times. Elsewhere, volcanoes with multiple craters were seen flooding the neighboring country with lava. We also saw fanatical people who kept lighting fires. As I watched this, my kind Jesus said to me, all afflicted, have you seen how they offend me and what I am preparing for them? I withdraw from the land of men. While he was telling me this, we came back to my bed. I understood that because of this withdrawal of Jesus, the men were going to commit even more misdeeds, more murders, and stand against each other. Then Jesus took his place in my heart and began to sob, saying, oh man, how I love you! If you knew how sad it bothers me to have to chastise you. But my justice obliges me to do so. Oh man, how sorry I am with your destiny. Then he burst into tears, repeating these words several times. How to express the pity, the fear, the torment that invades my soul. Especially seeing Jesus so afflicted. I tried to hide my sorrow from him as best I could to console him. I told him, O Lord, you will never chastise man like this. Divine Bridegroom, do not cry. As you have done so many times before, you will pour out your chastisements on me. You will make me suffer. Thus, your righteousness will not compel you to chastise your people. Jesus continued to weep and I repeated to him, listen to me a little. Didn't you put me in this bed so that I would be a victim for others? Maybe I wouldn't have been ready to suffer the previous times. For you to spare your creatures? Why don't you want to listen to me now? Despite my poor words, Jesus kept crying. Then, unable to take it any more, I opened the dam of my tears too, saying, Lord, if you intend to chastise men, I too cannot bear to see your creatures suffering so much. Consequently, if you really want to send them plagues and that my sins make me unworthy to suffer in their place, I want to leave. I don't want to live on this earth anymore. Then the confessor came. As he challenged me with obedience, Jesus withdrew and it all ended. The next morning, I always saw Jesus hiding in the depths of my heart. Even there, people came to trample on him. I was doing everything I could to free him and, turning to me, he said, do you see how ungrateful men have become? They force me to chastise them. I cannot do otherwise. And you, my dear daughter, after seeing me suffer so much, may you carry the crosses with even more love, and even with delight. This morning, my beloved Jesus continued to manifest himself in my heart. Seeing that he was a little more joyful, I took my courage with both hands and I begged him to reduce the punishments. He told me, "Oh, my daughter, what prompts you to beg me not to chastise my creatures?" I replied, "Because they are in your image, and when they suffer, you too suffer." He continued with a sigh, "Charity is dear to me to a point that you cannot understand. It is simple as my being is simple. Although simple, my being is immense, to the point that there is no place where it does not penetrate. This is the case with charity, being simple, it spreads everywhere. It has no regard for anyone in particular, whether it is a friend or an enemy, of a citizen or a foreigner, she loves everyone." This morning, when Jesus showed up, I was afraid that it was not him, but the devil. After my usual protests, I said to me, "Girl, do not be afraid, I am not the devil. Besides, if the devil speaks of virtue, it is a virtue with rose water and not a true virtue. He cannot infuse virtue into the soul, but only talk about it. If, at times, he makes the soul believe that he wants it to do some good, it cannot persevere in it, and while she does, she is nonchalant and restless. I am the only one who can infuse myself into hearts, that they may practice virtue and may they suffer with courage, serenity, and perseverance. Besides, since when does the devil seek virtue? Rather, it is the vices he is looking for. So don't be afraid and be peaceful." This morning, Jesus carried me out of my body and showed me several people arguing. Oh, how pained he was! Seeing him suffer in this way, I asked him to shed his suffering in me. He did not want to do so, since he persists in his intention to chastise the world. However, after much insistence on my part, he ended up answering me by pouring into me a little of his suffering. Then, somewhat relieved, he said to me, "The reason why the world is in such a lamentable state, it is that he has lost all spirit of submission to his leaders. And as God is the first leader against whom he rebels, he lost all submission to the Church, its laws, and to any legitimate authority. Ah, my daughter! What will happen to all these beings infected by the bad example of those themselves, who are called to be their leaders, their superiors, their parents, etc.? Ah! We get to the point where nor the parents, nor kings, neither the princes will be respected. They will be like vipers poisoning each other. So you can see how necessary punishments are and why death must come to destroy almost entirely my creatures. The small number of survivors will learn, at the expense of others, to become humble and obedient. Therefore, let me do it. Don't try to stop me from punishing my people." This morning, my adorable Jesus showed himself on the cross. He communicated his suffering to me, saying, "There are many wounds from which I suffered on the cross, but there was only one cross. Thus, there are many ways in which I attract souls to perfection. But there is only one heaven where these souls must gather. If the soul misses this heaven, there is no other who can offer him a blessed eternity." He added, "There was only one cross, but this cross was made up of various pieces of wood. Thus, there is only one heaven, but, in this sky, there are different places, more or less glorious, attributed according to the degree of suffering that one will have endured here on earth. Ah! If we knew how precious suffering is, we would compete with each other to suffer more. But this science is not recognized. Thus, men hate what could make them richer for eternity." After a few days of deprivation and tears, I was all confused and devastated. Internally, I kept repeating, "Tell me, oh my good, why have you distanced yourself from me? In what way have I offended you so that you no longer come, or that, when you come, you remain almost hidden and silent? Please don't make me wait any longer, because my heart can no longer bear it." Finally, Jesus manifested himself a little more clearly, and seeing me so devastated, he said to me, "If you knew how much I love humility. Humility is the smallest of plants, but its branches rise to heaven, surrounding my throne and penetrating deep into my heart. The branches produced by humility correspond to trust. In short, no true humility without trust. Humility without trust is a false virtue." These words of Jesus show that my heart was not only annihilated, but also discouraged. My soul continued to feel devastated and in fear of losing Jesus. He suddenly showed himself and said to me, "I keep you in the shadow of my charity. Since this shadow penetrates everywhere, my love keeps you hidden everywhere and in everything. Why are you afraid? How can I forsake you? While you are so deeply rooted in my love." I would have liked to ask him why he was not showing up as usual. But he disappeared without giving me time to say a single word. Oh my God, what suffering! I was still in the same state. This morning, I was particularly immersed in bitterness. I had almost lost hope that Jesus would come. Oh! So many tears shed. It was the last hour and Jesus still hadn't come. My God, what to do? My heart was beating very hard. My pain was so intense that I felt in agony. Inwardly, I say to Jesus, "My good Jesus, don't you see that I am dying? At least tell me that it is impossible to live without you. Despite my ingratitude in the face of all your graces, I love you very much. And, to repair my ingratitude, I offer you the cruel suffering caused to me by your absence. Come, Jesus. Be patient, you are so good. Don't make me wait any longer. Come. Ah! Don't you know that love is a cruel tyrant? Do you have no compassion for me?" I was in this lamentable state when Jesus finally came. In a voice filled with compassion, he said to me, "I'm here, don't cry any more, come to me." In an instant, I found myself out of my body in his company. I looked at him, but with such fear of losing him again that my tears began to flow. Jesus continued, "No, don't cry any more. See how I suffer. Look at my head, the thorns have penetrated so deeply that you can't see them anymore. See the many wounds and blood all over my body. Come up and console me." Focusing on his sufferings, I somewhat forgot about mine. I started with those of his head. Oh! I was so sorry to see the thorns so deep in his flesh that they could barely be removed. As I worked hard to do so, he groaned in pain. When I had finished tearing off her crown of broken thorns, I braided her again. Then, knowing what great pleasure Jesus can be given by suffering for him, I pushed it on my own head. Then he made me kiss his wounds one by one. And, for some, he wanted me to suck the blood. I did whatever he desired, albeit in silence. The Most Holy Virgin came and said to me, "Ask Jesus what he wants to do with you." This morning, Jesus came and took me to a church. There I attended Holy Mass and received communion from his hands. Then I clung so hard to his feet that I couldn't detach them anymore. Remembering the suffering of the last days caused by his absence, I was so afraid of losing him again that I said to him crying, "This time, I won't let you go because, when you leave me, you make me suffer too much and wait too long." Jesus said to me, "Come into my arms. May I comfort you and make you forget the sufferings of these last days." As I hesitated to do so, he stretched out his hands to me and lifted me up. Then he squeezed me on his heart saying, "Do not be afraid, for I will not abandon you. This morning, I want to please you. Come with me into the tabernacle." Thus, we withdrew into the tabernacle. There. Sometimes he kissed me and I kissed him. Sometimes I rested in him and he rested in me. Sometimes I could see the offenses he was receiving. And I made acts of reparation accordingly. How to describe Jesus' patience in the Blessed Sacrament? Just thinking about it leaves me amazed. Then Jesus made me see the confessor who came to bring me back to my body, and he said to me, "It's enough now, go, because obedience calls you." So, I felt that my soul was coming back into my body and that, in fact, the confessor challenged me in the name of obedience. Today, Jesus came without much delay. He told me, "You are my tabernacle." For me, being in the Holy Sacrament is like being in your heart. Even though I find in you something more, I can share my sufferings with you and to have you with me as a victim before divine justice, which I do not find in the sacrament. In saying this, he took refuge in me. While he was in me, he made me feel sometimes the bites of the thorns, sometimes the sufferings of the cross, sometimes the sufferings of his heart. I saw, around his heart, a braid of barbed wire that made him suffer a lot. Ah! How pity I felt to see him suffer like this. I would have liked to take upon myself his suffering, and with all my heart I begged him to give me his wounds and suffering. He said to me, "Girl, what offends my heart the most is sacrilegious masses and hypocrisy." I understood from these words that a person can outwardly express love and praise to the Lord and be internally ready to poison him. It may seem outwardly glorify and honor God, while she seeks inwardly glory and honors for herself. Every work done out of hypocrisy, even the most ostensibly holy, is poisoned and fills the heart of Jesus with bitterness. I was in my usual state when Jesus invited me to go and see what his creatures were doing. I said to him, "My adorable Jesus, this morning I don't want to go and see how much you are offended. Let's stay here together." But Jesus insisted that we go for a walk, wanting to please him. I said, "If you want to go out, let's go to churches because there you are less offended." So we went to a church. But, here too, he was offended, even more than elsewhere. Not because more sins are committed there than elsewhere, but because the offences committed there come from his beloved, of those who should expend themselves body and soul for his honor and glory. That is why these offences hurt his heart so deeply. I have seen devout souls who, because of futile concerns, they had not prepared well for communion. Instead of thinking of Jesus, their minds were occupied by Vetils. Ah! How pity Jesus is on those souls who feel sorry for themselves. They fix their attention on trifles, without the slightest glance for Jesus. Jesus said to me, "My daughter, see how these souls prevent me from pouring out my graces in them. I do not stop at trifles but at the love with which one comes to me. Instead of worrying about the things of love, these souls attach themselves to straw fetuses. Love can destroy straw, but even abundant straw cannot increase love in any way. It is even the opposite, the straw of personal concerns diminishes love. The worst thing for these souls is that they become disturbed and waste a lot of time. They like to spend hours talking with their confessor about all these trifles, but never make courageous resolutions to overcome these trivialities. And what should I say, oh my daughter, about certain priests? It can be said that they act almost satanically, by becoming idols for the souls they lead. Oh! Yes! It is above all these sons who pierce my heart. For if others offend me more, they offend the members of my body, while these offend me where I am most sensitive. That is, in the depths of my heart. How to describe the torments of Jesus? As he said these words, he wept bitterly. I did my best to console him. Then, together, we came back to my bed. This morning I was in my usual state when, suddenly, I found myself unable to move. I realized that someone was entering my little room, closing the door, and approaching my bed. I thought this person had sneaked in without my family noticing. So what was going to happen to me? I was so scared that my blood froze in my veins and that I trembled with my whole being. My God, what to do? I thought to myself. My family didn't see it. I am all numb and I cannot defend myself or call for help. Jesus, Mary, help me. Saint Joseph, defend me. When I realized that he was climbing on my bed to snuggle up to me, my fear was such that I opened my eyes and asked him, "Tell me who you are." He replied, "The poorest of the poor, I am homeless. I come to you if you will keep me with you in your little room. See, I'm so poor that I don't even have clothes. But you're going to take care of that." I looked at it. He was a boy of about 5 or 6 years old, without clothes, without shoes. He was very handsome and graceful. I replied, "As for me, I would gladly keep you, but what will my father say? I am not free to do what I want. I have parents who prevent me from doing so. As for clothes for you, I can provide for them with my poor labors and I will sacrifice myself if necessary. But it is impossible for me to keep you here. Besides, don't you have a father, a mother, a home?" The little boy replied sadly, "I don't have anyone. Oh! Please don't let me wander anymore, take me with you." I didn't know what to do. How to keep it? A thought touched my mind. Could it be Jesus? Or maybe a demon came to disturb me? Again, I said, "Tell me at least who you are." He repeated, "I am the poorest of the poor." I resumed, "Have you learned to make the sign of the cross?" "Yes," he said. "So, do it. I want to see how you do it." So he made the sign of the cross. Afterwards, I added, "Can you recite the Hail Mary?" "Yes," he replied, "but if you want me to recite it, let's do it together." I began the Hail Mary. And he said it with me when, suddenly, the purest light gushed from his forehead. Then, in the poorest of the poor, I recognized Jesus. In an instant, by his light, he made me lose consciousness and pulled me out of my body. I felt very confused in front of him, especially because of my many rebuffs. I said to him, "My dear little one, forgive me. If I had recognized you, I would not have refused you to enter. And then, why didn't you tell me it was you? I have so much to tell you. I would have told you instead of wasting my time on trivialities and fear unnecessarily. Besides, to keep you, I don't need my family. I am free to keep you, because you do not allow anyone to see you." As I spoke like this, he left, leaving me with my sorrow for not being able to tell him everything I wanted. It all ended like this. Today I meditated on the dangers to our souls that come from human praise. As I examined myself, to see if there was in me complacency in the face of human praise, Jesus said to me, "When a heart is filled with self-knowledge, the praises of men are like the waves of the sea, that rise and overflow, but without ever going beyond their borders. When praises make their cries heard and approach the heart, seeing that it is surrounded by the solid walls of self-knowledge, they do not find a place there and withdraw without causing any damage. You must give no importance to the praise or contempt of creatures." Today, while my kind Jesus was manifesting, I had the impression that he projected into me rays of light, penetrating me completely. Suddenly, I found myself out of my body in the company of Jesus and my confessor. Immediately, I prayed to my beloved Jesus to kiss my confessor and to snuggle up for some time in his arms. Jesus was a child. To please me, he promptly kissed the confessor on the cheek, but without detachment from me. All disappointed, I told him, "My little treasure, I would have liked you to kiss him not on the cheek, but on the mouth so that, touched by your very pure lips, his are sanctified and healed of their weakness. Thus, they could proclaim your word more freely and sanctify others. Please answer me." Jesus then gave him a kiss on the mouth and said, "I am so proud of souls detached from everything. Not only on the emotional level, but also on the affective level. As they strip away, my light invades them and they become transparent like crystal, so that nothing prevents the light of my sun from penetrating into them. Unlike buildings and other material things in relation to the material Sunday," he added. Ah! These souls believe they are stripping, but in reality, they are clothed. Spiritual things and even bodily things. For my providence is concerned in a special way with the stripped souls. My providence accompanies them everywhere. They seem to have nothing, but they have everything. Then we left the confessor to go to several pious people who seemed to work solely for their personal interests. Stepping forward in the midst of them, he said, "Woe to you who work solely for the purpose of making money. You already have your reward." This morning, Jesus appeared to me so afflicted and suffering that he provoked in my heart a lot of compassion. I did not dare to question him. We looked at each other in silence. From time to time, he would give me a kiss and then, in turn, I would kiss him. He has shown himself to be this way a few times. Last time, he showed me the church and said, "The church is modeled on heaven. Like heaven where there is a leader, who is God. As well as many saints of different conditions, orders, and merits. There is in my church a leader, who is the Pope. With, on its head, the triple crown tiara symbolizing the most holy Trinity. As well as many people dependent on him, namely dignitaries, the various orders, superior and inferior. All are there to beautify my church. Everyone is given a role, according to their position in the hierarchy. The virtues that flow from the faithful fulfillment of their roles exude such an aroma that the earth and the sky are perfumed and illuminated. The people are attracted by this fragrance and light, and are thus led to the truth. Following what I have just told you, I ask you to stop for a moment at the infected members of my church who, instead of flooding it with light, cover it with darkness. What trouble they are causing him." Then I saw the confessor near Jesus. Jesus stared at him with a penetrating glance and, turning to me, he said to me, "I want you to have full confidence in your confessor. Even in the smallest things. So that there is no difference between him and me whenever you trust him by listening to his words, I will be of the same opinion as him." These words of Jesus reminded me of some of the temptations of the devil that had made me a little suspicious. But, by his vigilance, Jesus corrected me. At the very moment, I felt freed from this mistrust. May the Lord be blessed forever. He who takes such great care of my miserable and sinful soul. This morning, Jesus barely showed himself. My mind was confused and I couldn't explain his absence when, suddenly, I felt surrounded by many spirits, angels, I think. From time to time, while I was in their midst, I looked around in the hope of at least feeling the breath of my beloved, but there was no indication of his presence. Suddenly, I felt a sweet breath behind my shoulders and immediately shouted, "Jesus, my Lord!" He replied, "Luisa, what do you want?" I continued, "Jesus, my beloved, come, do not stay behind my shoulders for I cannot see you. I was waiting for you and I looked for you all morning. I thought I could find you in the middle of these angelic spirits surrounding my bed. But I didn't find you. So, I became very tired, because without you, I can't rest. Come, we will rest together." Then Jesus came near me and held my head. The angel said to Jesus, "Lord, she recognized you very quickly. Not by the sound of your voice, but by your breath, and she called you immediately." Jesus answered them, "She knows me and I know her. It is as intimate to me as the pupil of my eye." While he was saying this, I found myself in the eyes of Jesus. How do I explain what I felt in those very pure eyes? Even the angels were amazed. Several times during the day, while I was meditating, Jesus came near me. He told me, "My person is surrounded by the actions of souls like a garment. The more pure their intentions and their love intense, the more splendor they give me. For my part, I give them more glory, so much so that on the day of judgment, I will make them known to the whole world. So that they may know how much they have honored me and how much I honor them." With a grieving look, he added, "My daughter, What will happen to souls who have done so many deeds, no matter how good? Without purity of intent, out of habit or selfishness. What shame they will feel on the day of judgment when they see these actions. Good in itself, but tarnished because of their imperfect intentions. Instead of honoring them, they will be a source of shame for themselves and for many others. In fact, it is not the magnitude of the actions that matters to me but the intention with which they are made. Jesus remained silent for some time as I pondered the words that he had told me. On the purity of intention and also on the fact that by doing good, creatures must die to themselves and become one with the Lord. Jesus added, "It is so, my heart is infinitely great. But the door to enter it is very narrow. No one can come to fill his void, except the stripped down and simple souls. Since its door is narrow, the slightest hindrance, the shadow of an attachment, an intention that is not straight, an action that is not intended to please me prevents them from coming to delight in it. Love of neighbor enters my heart. But, for this, he must be so united to my own love that he becomes one with him. That one cannot distinguish his love from mine. I cannot consider love of neighbor as my own if it is not transformed into my own love. This morning I was in a sea of afflictions because of Jesus' absence. After much suffering, Jesus came so close to me that I couldn't see him anymore. He put his forehead against mine, leaned his face against mine, and did the same for all the other members of his body. While he was in this position, I told him, "My adorable Jesus, don't you love me anymore?" He replied, "If I didn't love you, I wouldn't be so close to you." I continued, "How can you say that you love me if you don't let me suffer like you used to? I'm afraid you don't want me in this state anymore. At least free me from the confessor's annoyance." I felt like he wasn't listening to what I was saying. Instead, he made me see a multitude of people who were committing all kinds of sins. Indignant, he sent among them various contagious diseases, and as they died, many people became black as coal. Jesus seemed to want to make this multitude of sinners disappear from the face of the earth. Seeing this, I begged him to pour out his bitterness in me in order to spare the people. But he didn't listen to me. He said to me, "The worst punishment I could send you, to you, priests, and to the people, it would be to deliver you from this state of suffering. For, finding no more opposition, my justice would then pour out in all its fury. It would be a great misfortune for a person to be entrusted with a position, to then have it removed, because, by abusing his function, this person would not have benefited from it and would have made himself unworthy of it." Jesus came back several times today, but he was sad to split the soul. I tried to console him as best I could, sometimes by kissing him, sometimes by supporting his sore head, sometimes by saying words like these: "Heart of my heart, Jesus, you are not used to showing yourself to me too suffering. When you did it in the past, you poured out your suffering in me and immediately changed your appearance. But here, I am unable to console you. Who would have thought that after having made me share for so long your sufferings and after having done so much to dispose of it, are you depriving me of it now? Suffering out of love for you was my only consolation. It was suffering that allowed me to endure my exile on this earth. But I am now deprived of it and I do not know where to find support. Life has become very painful for me. Oh! Please, my bridegroom, my beloved, my life, please give me back your sorrows, let me suffer. Do not look at my unworthiness and my grave sins, but rather at your inexhaustible mercy." As I poured out my heart in Jesus, he approached and he said to me, "My daughter, it is my justice that wants to pour out on all creatures. The sins of men have almost reached the limit. And justice wants manifest his fury with brilliance and find redress for all these offenses. So that you understand how full I am of bitterness. To satisfy you a little, I will only pour my breath into you. Bringing his lips closer to mine, he blew into me. His breath was so bitter that I felt my mouth, my heart, and my whole being intoxicated. If, on its own, his breath was bitter to this extent, what about the rest of his person? He left me so sore that my heart was pierced. This morning, always showing himself to be distressed, my adorable Jesus carried me out of my body and showed various offenses that he was receiving. This time again, I asked him to pour out his bitterness in me. At first, he didn't seem to listen to me. He simply told me, "My daughter, charity is perfect only if it seeks only to please me. Only then can it be called charity. It can only be recognized by me if it is stripped of everything." Wanting to take advantage of these words of Jesus, I told him, "My beloved, it is precisely for this reason that I ask you to pour out your bitterness in me. To free yourself from so much suffering. If I also ask you to spare the creatures, it is because I remember that on other occasions, after chastising the creatures, then having seen them suffer so much from poverty and other things, you suffered a lot yourself. Then, after I begged you to the point of getting tired, you took pleasure in pouring out your sufferings in me, in order to spare creatures, and then, you were very happy. Don't you remember? Besides, aren't your creatures in your image?" Joined by my words, he said to me, "Because it is you, I will accede to your desire. Approach me and drink on my side." I approached to drink from his side. But it was not bitterness that I drank, but a very sweet blood that intoxicated my whole being with love and sweetness. I was full of it, even though it wasn't what I was looking for. Turning to him, I said, "My beloved, what are you doing? What flows on your side is not bitter but sweet. Oh! Please pour out your bitterness in me." He looked at me kindly and said, "Keep drinking, bitterness will come next." So I started drinking again. After the sweet had flowed for some time, the bitter came. I cannot define the intensity of this bitterness. Satiated, I stood up and, seeing the crown of thorns on his head, I removed it from him and pushed it on my own head. Jesus seemed quite obliging. Even if, on other occasions, he would not have allowed this. How beautiful he was to see after pouring out his bitterness. He seemed almost disarmed, without strength, and gentle as a little lamb. I realized it was very late. Since the confessor had come early in the morning, I did not know if he would return. Then, turning to Jesus, I said to him, "Very sweet Jesus, do not allow me to be an embarrassment to my family or to my confessor by forcing him to return. Oh! I beg you, make me come back into my body." Jesus answered, "My daughter, today, I don't want to leave you. I repeat, I, too, don't have the heart to leave you, but just do it for a little while, so that my family may see me present inside my body. Then we will come back together." After procrastinating for a long time and exchanging our farewells, he left me for a while. It was precisely lunchtime and my family came to invite me. Even though I felt that I had reintegrated my body, I was very suffering and I could not hold my head up. The bitter and sweet I had drunk on Jesus' side left me both so full and suffering that I could not have absorbed anything else. Bound by my word given to Jesus and under the pretext of the headache, I say to my family, "Leave me alone, I don't want anything." Free again, I immediately began to call my adorable Jesus who, still very affable, returned. How to say everything that happened to me today? The number of graces that Jesus filled with me. The number of things he made me understand? After staying for a long time to soothe my sufferings, he let a succulent milk flow from his mouth. In the evening, he left me assuring me that he would return soon. I found myself in my body again, but a little less suffering. For a few days, Jesus continued to manifest himself in the same way, not wanting to detach himself from me. It seemed as if the little suffering poured into me attracted him so much that he could not move away from me. This morning he poured a little more bitterness from his mouth to mine, and then he said to me, "The cross disposes the soul to patience. It unites heaven to earth, that is, the soul to God. The virtue of the cross is powerful. When it enters a soul, it has the power to remove rust from all things in the world. The cross leads the soul to regard the things of the earth as boring, disturbing and despicable. She makes him taste the flavor and delights of heavenly things. However, few souls recognize the virtues of the cross. Therefore, we hate her." By these words of Jesus, what things I have understood concerning the cross. Jesus' words are not like ours, of which we only understand what is said. A single one of his words spreads a light so intense in us that we could spend the whole day in deep meditation to understand it. Therefore, wanting to say everything would be too long and I cannot do it. A little later, Jesus returned. He looked a little distressed. I asked him why. He made me see several devout souls and he said to me, "My daughter, what I love in a soul, it is that she abandons her personal will. Only then can mine invest in it, divinize it and make it my own. Look at those souls who appear pious when all is well, but who, at the slightest annoyance for example, if their confessions are not long enough, or if the confessor displeases them, lose the peace. Some even end up not wanting to do anything anymore. Which clearly shows that it is not my will that dominates in them, but theirs. Believe me, oh my daughter, they have chosen the wrong path. When I see souls who really desire to love me, I have many ways of granting them my grace." It was pitiful to see Jesus suffer for such people. I did my best to console him, and then it all ended. This morning, I feared that it was not Jesus but rather the demon who wanted to deceive me. Seeing me fearful, Jesus said, "Humility attracts heavenly favors. As soon as I find humility in a soul, I pour out in abundance all kinds of heavenly favors. Rather than disturbing you, make sure that you are filled with humility and don't worry about the rest." Then he made me see several pious people, among whom there were priests, some of whom led a holy life. But, as good as they were, they didn't have that spirit of simplicity that makes it possible to believe the many graces and to the many means that the Lord uses with souls. Jesus said to me, "I communicate myself to the humble and the simple, even if they are poor and ignorant. For they immediately believe in my graces and they appreciate them greatly, but with those I am very reluctant. What brings the soul closer to me is first of all faith. These people, with all their science, doctrine, and even holiness, never experience receiving a ray of celestial light. They follow the natural path, but never manage to touch the supernatural in the slightest. This is why, in my mortal life, there was not a scholar, not a priest, not a powerful man among my disciples. All my disciples were ignorant and of modest condition. Because these people were more humble, simpler and also better disposed to make great sacrifices for me. This time, my adorable Jesus wanted to have a little fun. He would approach as if he wanted to listen to me, but as soon as I began to speak, it disappeared like lightning. Oh God, what suffering! While my heart was bathed in this bitter pain and trembling with impatience, he came back saying, "What's the matter? What's wrong? Be calm. Speak, what do you want?" But as soon as I opened my mouth to speak, he disappeared. I did everything I could to calm down, but I couldn't do it. After a while, my heart started to twitch again, even more than before, because of the absence of its one and only comfort. Coming back again, Jesus said to me, "My daughter, gentleness can change the nature of things. It can make bitterness sweet. So be gentler." But he did not give him time to say a word. That's how the morning went. Then I found myself out of my body with Jesus. There were a crowd of people, including some aspired to wealth, others to the honors, others to glory or to something else. There were also some who aspired to holiness, but none aspired to God Himself. All of them wanted to be recognized and considered important. Turning to these people and nodding His head, Jesus said to them, "You are foolish, you are working at your loss." Then, turning to me, He said to me, "My daughter, that's why I recommend in the first place to detach of everything and of oneself. When the soul has detached itself from everything, it no longer needs to struggle not to succumb to the things of the earth. The things of the earth, indeed, seeing themselves ignored and even despised by the soul, say goodbye to him. Leave and don't bother her anymore." This morning, I was in such a state of annihilation that I had become impatient and execrable. I saw myself as the most abominable being on earth. Like a little earthworm that turns and turns always in the same place, without ever being able to move forward or get out of the mud. Oh my God, what misery! I am so wicked, even after receiving so many graces. Always so benevolent to the wretched sinner that I am, the good Jesus came and said to me, "Self-contempt is commendable if it is accompanied by the spirit of faith. Otherwise, instead of leading to the good, it can harm the soul. Indeed, if, without the spirit of faith, you see yourself as you are, unable to do good, you will be carried away to discourage you and even to no longer take a single step on the way to good. But, if you rely on me, that is, if you allow yourself to be guided by the spirit of faith, you will come to know and despise yourself but, at the same time, to know me better and to remain confident that I can do everything with my help. In this way, you will walk in the truth." Oh! How these words of Jesus soothed my soul! I understood that I need plunge into my nothingness and discover who I am, but without stopping there. On the contrary, when I have seen who I am, I must immerse myself in the immense sea of God, to withdraw all the graces that my soul needs, otherwise my nature would get tired and the devil would play well to lead me to discouragement. May the Lord be blessed forever and may everything work together for His glory. This morning, when I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus came with my confessor. Jesus seemed a little disappointed with the latter, because, apparently, he wanted everyone to be of the opinion that my state was God's work. He tried to convince other priests by revealing things from my inner life to them. Jesus turned to the confessor and said, "This is impossible. I myself was plagued by opposition, even from very distinguished people, priests, and other people in authority. They found fault with my holy works, going so far as to say that I was possessed of the demon. I have allowed this opposition, even from religious people, so that the truth will come out more at the right time. If you want to consult 2 or 3 priests among the best, holiest, and most learned in order to be enlightened, I authorize you to do so. But for the rest, no and no. It would be wanting to spoil my works, to turn them into laughing stock, which I would dislike a lot." Then Jesus said to me, "All I ask of you is to remain righteous and simple. Don't worry about the opinions of creatures. Let them think what they want without disturbing you in the slightest. For by wanting to seek the approval of all, you stop imitating my own life." This morning, my very sweet Jesus wanted me to touch my nothingness with my own hands. The first words He spoke to me were, "Who am I and who are you?" This double question was accompanied by 2 intense rays of light. One showed me the greatness of God and the other, my misery and my nothingness. I realized that I was just a shadow, such as those formed by the sun by illuminating the earth. These shadows depend on the sun. As the sun moves, they cease to exist, deprived of its splendor. So it is with my shadow, that is, with my being. This shadow depends on God who, in an instant, can make it disappear. What then to say about the fact that I distorted this shadow that the Lord had entrusted to me, and who didn't even belong to me? This thought horrified me, seemed nauseating, infected and filled with worms. However, in my horrible state, I was forced to stand before Holy God. Oh! How I wish I could hide in the deepest of the abyss. Then Jesus said to me, the greatest grace a soul can receive is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge and knowledge of God go hand in hand. The more you know yourself, the more you know God. When the soul has come to know itself, she realizes that, alone, she cannot do anything right. As a result, his shadow, that is, his being, is transformed into God. She comes to do everything in God. She is in God and walks by his side. Without looking. Without probing. Not to mention. It's as if she's dead. De facto. Being aware of the depth of its nothingness. She does not dare to do anything by herself. But it blindly follows the trajectory of God. The soul that knows itself well resembles those people who travel by steamboat. Without taking a single step, they undertake long journeys. But everything is done thanks to the boat that carries them. It is the same for the soul who, entrusting his life to God, makes sublime flights on the paths of perfection. She knows, however, that she is doing them. Not by itself, but by the grace of God. Oh! Like the Lord favors this soul, enriches it and the height of his greatest graces, knowing that it does not attribute anything to itself, but gives thanks to him and attributes everything to him. Happy are you, O soul who knows yourself. This morning I was bathed in an ocean of afflictions because Jesus had not yet come. He didn't even let me see the shadow of himself. As he usually does when he does not come directly, for example by letting me see his hand or arm. My pain was so intense that I felt like my heart was being ripped out. On the other hand, on the days when I have to receive Holy Communion, as it was going to be the case this morning, he usually comes himself. Purify me and prepare me to receive it in the sacrament. I said to him, Holy Bridegroom, kind Jesus, what is going on? Won't you come and prepare me yourself? How will I be able to receive you? The time finally came, the confessor came, but Jesus was not there. What a heartbreaking sentence! So many tears shed. However, after communion, I saw my good Jesus, still as benevolent to the wretched sinner that I am. He carried me out of my body and I carried him in my arms. He had taken the form of a grieving young child. I said to him, my little child, my one and only good, why didn't you come? How have I offended you? What do you want from me to make me cry so much? My pain was so intense that, even as I held him in my arms, I kept crying. Before I had even finished speaking, Jesus, without answering me, brought his mouth to mine and poured his bitterness into it. When he stopped, I would talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. Then he began to pour out his bitterness again. Then, without answering any of my questions, he said to me, let me pour out my pain in you, otherwise. As I have chastised other places by hail, I will chastise your region. Let me pour out my bitterness and think of nothing else. He didn't add anything and it all ended. My state of annihilation was still going on. It became so deep that I didn't even dare to slip a word of it into my beloved Jesus. This morning, having mercy on my sad state, Jesus wanted to rejoice me. Here's how. When he showed up and as I felt all devastated and ashamed in front of him, he got so close to me that I believed that he was in me and I in him. Then he said to me, my beloved daughter, what makes you suffer so much? Tell me everything, because I will please you and remedy everything. I did not dare to say anything to her, because I continued to perceive myself as I described her the other day, that is, very wicked. But Jesus repeated, come on, tell me what you want. Don't be afraid. The dam of my tears burst and, seeing myself almost forced into it, I said to him, Holy Jesus, how not to be afflicted? After receiving so many graces, I should no longer be wicked. However, even in the good works I try to do, I mix so many flaws and imperfections that I hate myself. How can these works appear before you, you so perfect and so holy? And my sufferings that are becoming rarer than before, and your long delays to come, all this clearly indicates to me that my sins, my terrible ingratitudes are the cause. And, thus, because you are indignant against me, you refuse me even the daily bread that you give to everyone, that is, the cross. Thus, you will eventually abandon me completely. Is there greater affliction than that? Filled with compassion, Jesus hugged me on his heart, saying, "Don't be afraid. This morning we will do things together. I will be able to compensate for your own works." I then had the impression that in Jesus' womb there was a fountain of water and a fountain of blood. He plunged my soul into these two fountains, first into the water, then into the blood. I cannot say how much my soul was purified and embellished. Then we recited together 3 Glory to the Father. He told me he was doing this in order to support my prayers and adorations. Due to the majesty of God. Oh! How beautiful and touching it was to pray with Jesus. Afterwards, he said to me, "Do not be afflicted because of the lack of suffering. Would you like to get ahead of my time? I am not in a hurry. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Everything will be accomplished, but at the right time." Then, due to a completely unforeseen providential circumstance, the viatic having passed for other sick people, I was able to receive communion. After all that happened between Jesus and me, I cannot say how many kisses and caresses Jesus gave me. It's impossible to say everything. After communion, I thought I saw the sacred host, and in its center I saw sometimes the mouth of Jesus, sometimes his eyes, sometimes one hand, then his whole body. He carried me out of my body and I found myself first in the vault of heaven, then on earth in the midst of people, but always in his company. From time to time, he repeated, "Oh my beloved, how beautiful you are! If you knew how much I love you! And you, how do you love me?" Hearing this question, I thought I was dying, so confused I was. Despite everything, I had the courage to tell him, "Jesus, unique beauty, yes, I love you very much. And you, if you really love me, tell me, do you forgive me for all the harm I have done? But also give me suffering." Jesus answered, "Yes, I forgive you and I want to satisfy you, pouring my bitterness into you in abundance." Then he gave his bitterness. His heart seemed to contain a full fountain, caused by the offenses of men. He poured most of it into me. He added, "Tell me, what else do you desire?" I replied, "Most holy Jesus, I commend to you my confessor. Make him a saint and grant him the health of the body. However, is it really your will for this priest to come?" He said, "Yes." I added, "If you wanted to, you would heal him." Jesus continued, "Be quiet, don't try too hard to scrutinize my judgments." At that moment, he made me see the improvement of his bodily health and the sanctification of his soul. Then he added, "You want to go too fast, while I, do everything at the right time." Then I entrusted my loved ones to him and prayed for sinners, saying, "Oh! How I would like my body to burst into small pieces, as long as sinners convert." Then I fucked his forehead, eyes, face, and mouth, doing different acts of worship and reparation for the offenses that they sinners inflict on him. Oh! How happy Jesus was, and so was I. After getting the promise that he would never leave me again, I returned to my body and it all ended. My adorable Jesus, full of gentleness and benevolence, continues to manifest himself. This morning, when I was with him, he repeated to me again, "Tell me, what do you want?" I answered, "Jesus, my dear, truly, what I desire most. It is that everyone converts." What a disproportionate demand, isn't it? Nevertheless, my kind Jesus said to me, I could answer you if all had the goodwill to be saved. And to show you that I will grant you everything you desire, let's go together to the middle of the world. All those whom we find and who sincerely want to be saved, however evil they may be, I will give them to you. So we went among the people in search of those who would like to be saved. To my amazement, we found such a tiny number that it was pitiful. Among these were my confessor, most of the priests and some of the faithful, but not all of them were from Corato. Then he showed me various offences that were afflicted to him. I begged him to let me share his suffering. And, from his mouth to mine, he poured out his bitterness. Then he said to me, "My daughter, my mouth is too full of bitterness. Ah! Please fill it with sweetness." I said to him, "I would give you anything with pleasure, but I have nothing. Tell me what I can give you." He replied, "Let me drink the milk from your breasts, for in this way you will be able to fill me with sweetness." Just now, he lay down in my arms and started suckling. So I was afraid that it was not the child Jesus but the devil. So I put my hands on his forehead and made the sign of the cross. Jesus looked at me all joyfully, and as he continued to suck, he smiled, and his sparkling eyes seemed to tell me, "I am not a demon, I am not a demon." Once full, he climbed on my lap and kissed me everywhere. Since I also had a bitter taste in my mouth, because of the bitterness he had poured into me. In my turn I wanted to suck her breasts, but I did not dare. Jesus invited me to do so. Emboldened by his invitation, I began to suck. Oh! What heavenly sweetness came out of this blessed womb! But, how to express these things? Then I returned to myself, all flooded with sweetness and joy. I must now explain that when Jesus suckles my breasts, my body does not participate in any of this. In fact, it happens when I'm out of my body. Everything seems to happen only between the soul and Jesus, and when he does, he is still a child. The soul alone is present when this happens. I am usually in the vault of heaven or walking around somewhere in the world. Sometimes, when I come back to me, I feel pain in the place where he suckled. For he does it with such force that one would think that he wants to tear my heart out of my chest. I feel real pain, and as I return to me, my soul communicates that pain to my body. The same thing happens on other occasions as well. Like what? When he carries me out of my body and makes me share his crucifixion. He lays me down on the cross himself and pierces my hands and feet with nails. The pain is so intense that I think I will die. Then, when I come back to myself, I feel this crucifixion in my body, so much so that I can't move my fingers or arms. It is the same for the other sufferings that the Lord shares with me. To want to say everything would be too long. I will add that when Jesus suckles my breasts, I feel that it is in my heart that he draws what he is thirsty for. This is so true that I feel like my heart is being ripped out of my chest. Sometimes, feeling this pain, I say to Jesus things like, "My beautiful little one, you are a little too impertinent. Go slower because it's very painful." As for him, he smiled. Likewise, when it is I who suck Jesus, it is from his heart that I absorb milk or blood. So much so that, for me, suckling the breast of Jesus is like drinking from the wound on his side. However, since the Lord pleases himself from time to time to pour into me a sweet milk from his mouth or to let me drink the most precious blood on his side, then, when he sucks at me, he sucks nothing but what he himself gave me. For I personally have nothing to soften his sorrows. On the contrary, a lot to give him. This is so true that sometimes, while he is suckling me, I suckle it at the same time. By clearly understanding that what he draws from me is nothing but what he himself gives me. I think I have explained myself sufficiently and as best I could on this point. All morning, I was very anxious because of the many wounds that men inflict on Jesus, especially some monstrous dishonesty. What a pain for Jesus to see souls lost! When it is a newborn who is killed without baptizing him, he suffers even more. I feel like That this sin weighs heavily in the balance of divine justice and that it provokes more divine punishments. Such scenes are frequently renewed. My sweetest Jesus was sad to die. Seeing him like this, I did not dare to talk to him. He simply told me, "My daughter, join your sufferings and prayers to mine for that they be more acceptable to the Divine Majesty. Let her accept them not as coming from you, but from me." He manifested himself in this way a few times, but always in silence. May the Lord be blessed forever. My sweet Jesus continued to manifest himself only a few times and almost only in silence. My mind was confused because I feared to lose my only good and for many other reasons that it is not necessary to mention here. Oh God, what suffering! While I was in this state, he showed up briefly. He seemed to hold a light from which other small lights emanated. He said to me, "Cast out all fear from your heart. Look, I have brought you this light to place it between you and me as well as these other little lights to place them in those who will approach you. For those who will approach you with a straight heart and to do you good. These lights will enlighten their minds and hearts. Will fill them with joy and heavenly graces and they will clearly understand what I am doing in you. Those who approach you with other intentions will experience the opposite. These lights will make them stunned and confused." After these words, I became quieter. May everything work together for the glory of God. As I was to receive communion this morning, I prayed to my good Jesus to come and prepare myself before the confessor arrived to celebrate Holy Mass. Otherwise, Jesus, how can I receive you, me so wicked and ill-disposed? While I prayed like this, my Jesus was happy to come. And, seeing him, I had the impression that he penetrated me with his very pure and sparkling looks of light. How to explain what these looks produced in me? Not the shadow of a little dust escaped him. I would prefer not to talk about these things, since the operations of grace can hardly be expressed in words and that there is a great risk of distorting the truth. But Lady Obedience doesn't want me to be silent. And, when it requires something, one must close one's eyes and submit without saying anything. Being a lady, she knows how to be respected. So I continue my narration. From Jesus' first glance, I begged him to purify me. It seemed to me that everything that cast a shadow over my soul was swept away. At his second glance, I asked him to light me up. Indeed, what would be the use of a precious stone to be pure if it cannot attract the admiring eyes? Shining before their eyes? We might look at it, but with an indifferent eye. I needed this light. Not only to make my soul shine, but also to help me grasp the greatness of what was going to happen to me. I was going to be not only looked at by my sweet Jesus, but identified with him. Jesus seemed to penetrate me as sunlight penetrates the crystal. Then, as he was always looking at me, I said to him, "Very kind Jesus, since it pleased you to purify me, then to enlighten me, be kind now and sanctify me. This is very important since I will receive you, the Holy of Holies. It is not fitting that I am so different from you." Always so benevolent towards his wretched creature. Jesus took my soul in his creative hands and made alterations everywhere. How can I say what these retouchings have produced in me and how my passions have taken their place? Sanctified by these divine touches. My desires, my inclinations, my affections. The beating of my heart and all my senses were completely transformed. Without jostling as before. They formed a sweet harmony in the ears of my dear Jesus. They were like rays of light hurting his adorable heart. Oh! How he was having fun and what happy moments I enjoyed. Ah! I have experienced the peace of the saints. It was for me a paradise of joy and delight. Then Jesus put on my soul with the mantle of faith, hope and charity, whispering in my ear how to practice these virtues. He continued by penetrating me with another ray of light that made me see my nothingness. Ah! I felt like I was just a grain of sand at the bottom of a vast ocean, which is God, this grain of sand was dissolving in this immense sea, i.e. in God. Then he and carried out of my body. By holding me in his arms and by constantly whispering acts of contrition for my sins. I only remember seeing myself as an abyss of iniquities. Ah! Lord, how ungrateful I have been to you. Meanwhile, I was looking at Jesus. He wore the crown of thorns on his head. I took it away from her, saying, "Give me the thorns, O Jesus, for I am a sinner. The thorns suit me, but not you, the righteous, the most holy." Then Jesus pushed it on my head. Then, I don't know how, I saw the confessor from afar. Immediately, I prayed to Jesus to go and prepare him for communion as well. I believe he went because, soon after, he came back and said to me, "I desire that your way of acting with me and with the confessor be the same. I want the same as far as he is concerned. He must see you and treat you as if you were another self. For you are a victim as I was. I want this so that everything may be purified and only my love may shine in all things." I said, "Lord, it seems impossible to me to act with the confessor as I do with you, especially because of my instability." Jesus continued, "True love makes all rough edges disappear, and with enchanting mastery it lets God shine alone in all things." Then the confessor came to call me to obedience. He celebrated Holy Mass on the occasion of which I received communion. It all ended like this. How can I talk about the intimacy with which everything happened between Jesus and me? It is impossible to express, I have no words to make myself understood. Therefore, I will stop here. This morning, my adorable Jesus was not coming. I thought, why doesn't he come? What's new now? Yesterday he came so often, and today the hour is late and he has not yet come. I am heartbroken. How patient you have to be with Jesus. The desire to see Jesus raised such a struggle in my whole being that I thought I was dying of pain. My will, which should dominate everything in me, tried to persuade my senses, inclinations, desires, affections, and everything else to calm down, since Jesus was coming. After a prolonged time of suffering, Jesus arrived holding in his hand a cup of clotted, putrefied and foul-smelling blood. He said to me, "You see that cup of blood? I will pour it over the world." While he was speaking, my mother, the Blessed Virgin, came and my confessor was with her. They begged Jesus not to pour this cup on the world, but to make me drink it. The confessor said to Jesus, "Lord, why did you choose her as a victim if you don't want to pour the cup into her? I absolutely want you to make her suffer and spare the people." My mom was crying, and with the confessor, she told Jesus that she would continue to pray until Jesus accepted the fellowship. At first, Jesus seemed almost disapproving of the suggestion and he persisted in wanting to pour the cup on the world. I was confused and couldn't say anything. For the sight of this horrible cup filled me with such terror that I trembled with all my being. How could I drink it? However, I was resigned. If the Lord gives it to me to drink, I will accept. If, on the other hand, the Lord decided to shed this blood on the world, who knows what punishments it would follow. It seemed to me that he was keeping in reserve hail that was going to cause a lot of damage and that was going to continue for several days. Then Jesus seemed a little calmer. He embraced the confessor because he had prayed to him in this way, without however deciding whether or not he would pay the cup on the world. It all ended like this, leaving me in indescribable suffering because of what might happen. Jesus continues to manifest himself with the intention of chastising creatures. I begged him to pour out his bitterness in me and spare the whole world. Or, at least, mine and my city. The confessor agrees with me. Somewhat conquered by our prayers, Jesus shed in me a little bitterness from his mouth, but not the cup of blood mentioned above, cf. June 14. The little he paid, I understand that he was doing it to spare my city and mine, but not completely. This morning I was a source of suffering for him. As he looked calmer after pouring some of his bitterness into me, I said to him without thinking too much, "My kind Jesus, I beg you to free me from the boredom I cause to the confessor by having to come every day. What would it cost you to free me yourself from my state of suffering, since it was you yourself who placed me there? Indeed, it would not cost you anything and, when you want it, everything is possible for you." At these words, Jesus' face expressed such affliction that it penetrated to the depths of my heart. And, without answering me, he disappeared. I remained very saddened, only the Lord knows how much. Especially at the thought that he would not come back again. However, a little later, he came back even more distressed. His face was swollen and bloodied because of the offenses he had just suffered. Sadly, he said to me, "Look at what they did to me. How can you ask me not to chastise creatures? Punishments are necessary in order to humiliate them and to prevent them from becoming even more arrogant. Everything is going as usual. However, especially this morning, I put all my time to plead with Jesus. He wanted to keep bringing down the hail as he has done in recent days and I didn't want to. In addition, a thunderstorm was brewing. The demons were about to strike a few places by the scourge of hail. Meanwhile, I saw the confessor who was calling me from afar, ordering me to go and cast out the demons so that they could do nothing. As I was on my way, Jesus came to meet me to prevent me from moving forward. I said to her, "Oh my Lord, I cannot stop, it is obedience that calls me and you know like me that I must submit to it." Jesus answered me, "Well, I'll do it for you." He commanded the demons to go further and not to touch the lands belonging to our city for the time being. Then he said to me, "Let's go." So we came back, me in my bed and Jesus by my side. When he arrived, he wanted to rest, saying that he was very tired. I challenged him and said, "What does this sleep mean? You just made me do a beautiful act of obedience and now you want to sleep? Is this the love you have for me and your way of contenting me in everything? So you want to sleep? Well, you can sleep, as long as you give me your word that you won't do anything." "Sorry to see me so unhappy," he said to me. "My daughter, despite everything, I want to satisfy you. Let's go together once again in the midst of the people and see which ones deserve to be punished for their evil deeds. Perhaps, thanks to the scourge, they converted. I will save the ones you want. Those who need less punishment and whom you want to spare. I repeat, Lord, I thank you for your infinite kindness in wanting to give me satisfaction. But, in spite of this, I cannot do what you tell me. I have neither the strength nor the will to see one of your creatures chastised. What torment it would be for my heart, if I learned that one of them had been punished and that I would have wanted it. May it never be so, never, O Lord." Then the confessor called me to obedience and it all ended. Yesterday, having lived a day of purgatory due to of the almost total deprivation of my greatest good and the many temptations of the devil, I felt like I had committed a multitude of sins. O God! What a pain to have offended my Jesus! This morning, as soon as I saw him, I said to him, "Good Jesus, forgive me all the sins I committed yesterday." Interrupting me, he said to me, "If you annihilate yourself, you will never sin." I wanted to keep talking, but while he was showing me several devout souls, he made me understand that he did not want to listen to me. He continued, "What displeases me most about these souls is their inconsistency in the good. The slightest little thing, a disappointment, even a defect, is enough and although it is more than ever the time to cling to me, they are disturbed, irritated and neglect the good already begun. How many times I have prepared graces for them, but in the face of their inconstancy, I have had to hold them back. For my part, knowing that he refused to hear what I wanted to say to him, and seeing that my confessor was not physically well, I prayed for him for a long time and asked Jesus some questions, which it is not necessary to mention here. With kindness, Jesus answered all of them, and then it all ended. This morning, everything was going as usual. Jesus seemed to want to rejoice me a little, since I had been waiting for him for a long time. From a distance, I saw a child falling from the sky like a lightning bolt. I ran to him and took him in my arms. A doubt touched my mind that it might not have been Jesus. So I said to the child, "My dear little treasure, tell me, who are you?" And he replied, "I am your beloved Jesus." I said to him, "My adorable little baby, please take my heart and bring it with you to heaven because, after the heart, the soul will follow well too." Jesus seemed to take my heart and he united it so much with his that the two became one. Then the sky opened and everything seemed to indicate that a very big party was brewing. A young man of beautiful appearance came down from heaven, all dazzling with fire and flames. Jesus said to me, "Tomorrow will be the feast of my dear Luis de Gonzaga. I have to be there." I said to him, "So you will leave me alone? What am I going to do?" He resumed, "You will come too. Look how beautiful Luis is. But what is greatest in him, what distinguished him on earth? It is the love with which he did everything. Everything in him was love. Love inhabited him internally and surrounded him externally. So that it can be said that he breathed love. That is why it was said that he never had a distraction because love flooded him from everywhere and will flood him eternally, as you can see. Indeed, the love of St. Louis seems to me so great that his fire could reduce the whole world to ashes." Jesus added, "I walk over the highest mountains and there I delight." As I did not understand the meaning of these words, he continued, "The highest mountains are the saints who have loved me the most and in whom I delight, both during their stay on earth and when they are in heaven. It's all in love." Then I asked Jesus to bless me and those I saw at that time. After blessing us, he disappeared. As Jesus did not arrive, I said to myself, "Maybe he won't come anymore and leave me abandoned." And I kept repeating, "Come, my beloved, come." Suddenly, he came saying, "I will not leave you, I will never abandon you. You too, come, come to me." I immediately ran into his arms, and while I was there, he continued, "Not only will I not leave you, but out of love for you, I will not leave Corrado." And, without me realizing it, he suddenly disappeared. More than before, I was burning with the desire to see him again and again and again. "What have you done to me? Why did you leave so quickly without even saying goodbye?" While I expressed my sorrow, the image of the child Jesus, whom I keep close to me, seemed to come alive to me and, from time to time, he took his head out of the glass bell to observe me. As soon as he realized that I had seen it, he would take it inside. I said to him, "It is clear that you are too insolent and that you want to act like a child. I feel like I'm going crazy with pain because you're not coming, and you're having fun. Well, play and have fun as much as you want. Because I will be patient." This morning my sweet Jesus continued with his little games and jokes. He put his hands on my face as if he wanted to caress me. But, at the time of doing so, he disappeared. He would then come back, surrounding my neck with his arms like a hug. When I stretched out my arms to kiss him, he disappeared like lightning and I couldn't find him. How do I describe the pain in my heart? While I was crushed by the sea of suffering, to the point of feeling life abandon me, the Queen of Heaven came, carrying the child Jesus in her arms. The three of us kissed, the Mother, the Son and me. Thus, I had time to say to Jesus, "My Lord Jesus, I have the impression that you have taken away your grace from me." He replied, "Little fool! How can you say that I have taken my grace away from you when I live in you? What is my grace, if not myself?" I remained more confused than before, realizing that I was unable to speak, and that, in the few words spoken, I had said only nonsense. Then the Queen Mother disappeared. And it seemed to me that Jesus had locked himself in me and stayed there. During my meditation, he showed himself sleeping inside of me. I looked at him, delighting in his beautiful face but without waking him up, happy to at least be able to see him. Suddenly, the beautiful Queen Mother came back. She took him out of my heart and shook him sharply to wake him up. When he was awakened, she put him in my arms again, saying, "My daughter, don't let him sleep because, if he sleeps, you'll see what happens." A thunderstorm was coming. Half asleep, the baby stretched out his two little hands around my neck, and as he squeezed me, he said, "Mom, let me sleep." I say, "No, no, my treasure, it is not I who want to prevent you from sleeping, it is Our Lady Mary who does not want it. Please please him. You can't deny anything to a mom, let alone that mom." After keeping him awake for a while, he disappeared and it all ended like this. After I heard Holy Mass and received communion, my kind Jesus manifested himself in my heart. I then felt that I was leaving my body but without the company of Jesus. I saw, however, my confessor and, since he had said to me, "Our Lord will come after communion and you will pray for me," I told him, "Father, you told me that Jesus was coming, but he has not yet come." He replied, "It's because you don't know how to look for him. Look, for he is in you." I began to look for Jesus in me and saw his feet protruding outside of me. I immediately grabbed them and pulled Jesus towards me. I kissed him everywhere. And, seeing the crown of thorns on his head, I took it from him and placed it in the hands of the confessor, asking him to push it on my head. He did so but, despite his efforts, he could not push a single thorn. I said to him, "Push harder, don't be afraid to make me suffer too much because, you see, Jesus is there to strengthen me." Despite his repeated efforts, he couldn't do it. Then he said to me, "I'm not strong enough. These spines have to get into your bones and I don't have the strength to do that." I turned to Jesus and said, "You can see that the Father doesn't know how to push it. Do it a little yourself." Jesus stretched out his hands, and in an instant he brought all the thorns into my head. This caused me great satisfaction as well as indescribable suffering. Then the confessor and I prayed to Jesus to pour out his bitterness in me, that he may spare creatures from the many plagues he intends for them. As it seemed to be happening at that time, because the hail was about to fall not far from here. In response to our prayers, the Lord has brought down only a little. Then, as the confessor was still there, I began to pray for him, saying to Jesus, "My good and dear Jesus, I beg you to grant your grace to my confessor so that he may be according to your heart, and also to give him physical health." You saw how he cooperated, not only by removing the crown of thorns from your head, but also by letting you place it on my head. If he didn't manage to push it into my head, it's not because he didn't want to relieve you, it's because he lacked strength. So, all the more reason for you to answer it. So, tell me, oh my one and only good, are you going to heal him both in his soul and in his body? Jesus heard me but answered nothing. I begged him again insistently, saying, "I will not leave you and stop praying until you promise me to grant him what I ask of you." But he hasn't said anything yet. Then we found ourselves in the company of several people sitting around a table, eating. There was a portion for me. Jesus said to me, "My daughter, I am hungry." I replied, "I give you my portion. Aren't you happy?" He said, "Yes, but I don't want to be seen." I continued, "Well, I'll pretend to take it for myself and give it to you without anyone noticing." That is what we have done. After a while, Jesus stood up, brought his lips close to my face, and began to play a trumpet tune with his mouth. All these people began to pale and tremble, saying to themselves, "What's going on? What is going on? We're going to die." I said to Jesus, "Lord Jesus, what are you doing? How is it done? Until now, you wanted to go unnoticed and now you're having fun. Be careful. Stop scaring these people. Don't you see that they are all scared?" He replied, "This is still nothing. What will happen when, suddenly, I play harder? They will be so seized that many will die of fright. I resumed, My adorable Jesus, what are you saying there? Do you still want to exercise your justice? Pity, pity for your people, I beg you. Then Jesus wore his gentle and benevolent air, and I, still seeing the confessor, I began to bother him again about him. He said to me, I will make your confessor like a grafted tree into which the old tree is no longer recognizable, neither in his soul nor in his body. And, as a token of this, I have placed you in his hands as a victim, so that he can benefit from it. This morning, Jesus continued to manifest himself only occasionally by sharing with me a little of his sufferings. The confessor was sometimes with him. Seeing the latter, and seeing that he had entrusted me with some of his intentions, I begged Jesus to grant him what he asked. As I prayed to him like this, Jesus turned to the confessor saying, I want faith to flood you as the waters of the sea flood the boats. Since I am faith, you will be flooded by me. Who owns everything? Who can do everything and who gives freely to anyone who trusts me? Without you even thinking to what will happen, nor when it will happen, or how you will act. I will be there to help you according to your needs. He added, if you practice immersing yourself in the faith, then, to reward yourself, I will infuse into your heart 3 spiritual joys. First, you will clearly perceive the things of God, and by doing holy things, thou shalt be filled with such joy and joy, that you will be completely impregnated with it. Second, you will feel indifference to the things of the world and joy for heavenly things. Third, you will be perfectly detached from everything, and things that once exerted an attraction on you will become annoyances. This I have already infused into you for some time. Your heart will be flooded with that joy enjoyed by stripped souls. Those souls whose hearts are so full of my love that they are not distracted by the external things around them. This morning, Jesus renewed in me the sorrows of the crucifixion. Our Queen Mother was there, and Jesus said to me about her, my kingdom was in my mother's heart, since her heart never experienced the slightest turmoil. This is so true that, even in the stormy sea of passion, then, that she has endured unspeakable suffering, and that his heart was pierced by the sword of pain. She did not experience the slightest inner turmoil. Thus, as my kingdom is a kingdom of peace, I was able to establish it in her and reign freely without any obstacle. Jesus returned several times, and I, aware of my sinfulness, said to him, my Lord Jesus, I feel totally covered with serious wounds and sins. Oh! Please, I beg you, take pity on this miserable creature that I am. Jesus answered me, do not be afraid, for there are no grave sins. Of course, one must abhor sin. But we must not be disturbed. For trouble, whatever its source, never does any good to the soul. He added, my daughter, like me, you are a victim. May all your actions shine with the same pure and holy intentions as mine. So that, seeing my own image in you, I may freely flood you with my graces and, so adorned, I may present you as an odorous victim to divine justice. This morning Jesus wanted to renew in me the pains of his crucifixion. First, he carried me out of my body to a mountain and asked me if I would agree to be crucified. I replied, yes, my Jesus, I long for nothing but your cross. At the very moment, a huge cross appeared. He stretched me out and nailed me with his own hands. What excruciating pains I felt in my hands and feet, especially since the nails were sharp and very difficult to drive. But, in the company of Jesus, I was able to endure everything. When he finished crucifying me, he said to me, my daughter, I need you to continue my passion. Since my glorious body can no longer suffer, I use your body to continue to suffer my passion and to be able to offer as a living victim reparation and atonement before divine righteousness. Then I thought I saw heaven opening up and a multitude of saints coming down from it. All were armed with a sword. Within this multitude, a thunderous voice was heard, saying, "We are coming. Defend the righteousness of God and avenge her on the men who have so abused her mercy." What happened on earth at the time of this descent of the saints? All I can say is that many were fighting, that some were on the run and that others were hiding. All seemed frightened. These days, Jesus rarely shows up. His visits are like lightning. While I hope to be able to contemplate it for a long time, it disappears quickly. If, sometimes, there is a moment left, it is almost always in silence. And if he speaks a little, as soon as he is gone, he seems to take back his word and his light. So that I do not remember what he said and that my mind remains as confused as before. What misery! My sweet Jesus, have mercy on my misery and be merciful. Without wishing to dwell on my daily activities, I will now report some words that he has addressed to me over the past few days. I remember that at one point when I was lamenting because he had abandoned me, he called to him many angels and saints and said to them, "Listen to what she says I have abandoned her." Explain to him a little, is it possible that I abandon those who love me? She loved me, so how can I abandon her? The saints agreed with the Lord, and I remained deeply humiliated and more confused than before. On another occasion, after telling him, "In the end, you will abandon me completely," Jesus replied, "Girl, I can't abandon you. As proof of this, I poured out my sufferings in you." Then, while I entertained the following thought, "Why, Lord, did you allow the confessor to come? Everything could have happened between you and me." I found myself at the very moment out of my body, lying on a cross. But there was no one to nail me to it. I began to pray to the Lord to come and crucify me. He came and said to me, "Do you see how necessary it is for a priest to be at the center of my works? He is simply a help to complete your crucifixion. Indeed, one cannot crucify oneself, one needs another. Things almost always happen the same way." This time it seemed to me that Jesus' host was there in my heart, flooding me with many rays from the Holy Host. Several suns coming out of my heart intertwined with the rays emanating from the host. I felt like that, by his love, Jesus attracted me to him and that, through these suns, my heart attracted him and bound him entirely to me. This morning, my adorable Jesus showed himself carrying a shining gold cross on his neck, which he looked at with great satisfaction. Suddenly, the confessor appeared and Jesus said to him, "The sufferings of the last few days have increased the splendor of my cross, so much so that it is a delight for me to look at it." Then, turning to me, he said to me, "The cross gives the soul such splendor that it becomes all transparent. Just as one can give all the colors to a transparent object, the cross, by its light, gives the soul facets as varied as they are splendid. On the other hand, on a transparent object, dust, the slightest spots and even shadows can be easily detected. This is the case with the cross. Since it makes the soul transparent, it allows him to spot its smallest defects and its slightest imperfections. So much so that no master hand can do better than the cross to transform the soul into a dwelling worthy of the God of heaven. Who could say all that I have understood about the cross and how enviable the soul that possesses it seems to me?" Then he carried me out of my body. I found myself at the top of a very high staircase under which there was a precipice. The steps of this staircase were mobile and so narrow that you could barely tiptoe on it. The most terrifying was the precipice itself and the fact that the staircase had no ramp or support. If someone tried to cling to the steps, they would tear themselves apart. Seeing that most people were falling, I was frozen to the bone. However, it was absolutely necessary to climb these steps. So I walked down the stairs, but after 2 or 3 steps, seeing how much I was in danger of falling into the abyss, I begged Jesus to come to my rescue. Without me knowing how, he was near me and he said to me, "My daughter, what you have just seen. This is the path that every man must travel on this earth. Mobile steps you can't even lean on are the things of the earth. If a man tries to rely on these things, instead of helping him, they push him to fall into hell. The safest way is to climb and fly almost without touching the ground, without looking at others and keeping my eyes fixed on me, in order to receive help and strength. Thus, one can easily avoid the precipice." This morning, my adorable Jesus came under an appearance as magnificent as mysterious. He wore a chain covering his chest entirely around his neck. At one end of this chain hung a kind of ark and to the other, a kind of quiver filled with precious stones and jewels. In his hand, he was holding a spear. He said to me, "Human life is a game. Some play for fun. Others for money. Others play their own lives, etc. I also have fun playing with souls. So what tricks do I play on them? These are the crosses I send them. If they accept them with resignation and thank me for them, I have fun and play with them, delighting me immensely, receiving much honor and glory, and leading them to make the greatest progress." As he spoke, he touched me with the spear. All the precious stones that lined the bow and quiver detached and turned into crosses and arrows to hurt the creatures. Some creatures, but very few, rejoiced, embraced these crosses and arrows and engaged in the game with Jesus. Others, on the contrary, grabbed these objects and threw them in the face of Jesus. Oh! How afflicted he was! What a pain for these souls! Jesus added, "This is the thirst for which I cried out on the cross. Having been unable to seal it completely at that time, I delight in continuing to seal it in the souls of my suffering loved ones. So when you suffer, you relieve my thirst." As he has returned many other times, I begged him to release my suffering confessor. He said to me, "My daughter, don't you know that the most beautiful mark of nobility that I can print in a soul, is at the cross?" This morning, following his habit, Jesus carried me out of my body. We met a crowd of people, most of whom were determined to judge the conduct of others without looking at theirs. My beloved Jesus said to me, "The surest way to act righteously towards others is not to look at what they are doing. Because looking, thinking, and judging are the same thing. When you look at your neighbor, one defrauds one's own soul. One is not honest with oneself, nor with one's neighbor, nor with God." Then I told him, "My only good, it's been a long time since you kissed me." So we kissed. Then, as if he wanted to rebuke me, he added, "My daughter, what I recommend to you, it is to cherish my words, for they are eternal and pure as I am. By engraving them in your heart and by making them grow, you work for your sanctification. As a reward, you receive eternal splendor. If you do otherwise, your soul withers and you are in debt with me." Jesus returned this morning, but in silence. Nevertheless, I was very happy because, as long as I had my treasure Jesus with me, I was perfectly satisfied. As soon as I saw it, I understood several things about it. Its beauty, his goodness and its other qualities. However, as everything happened in my mind and through communication intellectual, my mouth cannot express anything about these things. So I remain silent. This morning, my very kind Jesus carried me out of my body and made me see the corruption in which humanity lies. It was horrifying. While I was in the midst of people, Jesus, on the verge of tears, said to me, "O man, how disfigured and degraded you! I created you so that you might be my living temple, but you became the abode of the devil. Look, even the plants, covered with leaves, with their flowers and fruits, teach you the respect and modesty you must have for your body. But, by losing all modesty and all natural reserve, you have become worse than animals. So much so that I cannot compare you to anything else. You were my image, but I no longer recognize you. I am so horrified by your impurities that a single glance at you makes me nauseous and forces me to walk away. As he spoke, I was tortured by the pain of seeing my beloved so sad. I told him, Lord, it is true that you can no longer find anything good in man and that he has become so blind that he can no longer even keep the laws of nature. So if you only look at man, you will want to send him punishments. That is why I beg you to look at your mercy, and so everything will be arranged. Jesus said to me, Girl, relieve me a little of my suffering. Saying this, he removed the crown of thorns that was sunk on his adorable head and he pushed it on mine. I felt very much pain, but I was happy to see that Jesus was relieved. Then he says, Girl, I love pure souls very much as I am forced to flee souls impure, as much as I am attracted to pure souls as by a magnet, and I come to dwell in them. To these souls, I gladly lend my mouth, so that they speak with my language and so that they have no effort to make to convert souls. I delight not only to perpetuate my passion in these souls, and thus to continue in them the redemption, but I also take pleasure in making my own virtues blossom in them. This morning, my adorable Jesus showed himself all afflicted and almost angry with men, threatening to send them the usual punishments and to make people die suddenly by lightning, hail, and fire. I begged him insistently to appease himself, and he said to me, The iniquities that rise from earth to heaven are so numerous that if the prayers and sufferings of the soul victim ceased for a quarter of an hour, I would bring fire out of the bowels of the earth and flood the people. He added, Look at all the graces that I had to pour out on the creatures. Since they do not correspond to it, I am forced to hold them back. Even worse, they force me to change these graces into punishments. Be attentive, O my daughter, in order to correspond well to the many graces that I pour into you. For correspondence to my graces is the door. Who lets me enter a heart to make my home? This correspondence is like that warm and affable welcome that we give when someone comes to visit us, in such a way that attracted by these courtesies, the visitor feels compelled to return and even feels unable to leave. It's all in the welcome to me. Following the way souls welcome and treat me on earth, I will welcome them and I will treat them in heaven. By opening wide the doors of heaven to them, I will invite the whole heavenly court to come and welcome them, and I will make them sit on the most sublime thrones. For souls who have not corresponded to my graces, it will be the opposite. This morning, my kind Jesus was not coming. After a very long wait, he finally arrived. I felt so confused and devastated that I couldn't tell her anything. He said to me, The more you annihilate yourself and learn to recognize your nothingness, the more my humanity will communicate its virtues to you and flood you with its light. I replied, Lord, I am so wicked and ugly that I hate myself. What am I in your eyes? Jesus continues, If you are ugly, I can make you beautiful. As I said these words, a light emanating from him came to my soul and I felt that he was transmitting his beauty to me. Then, while kissing me, he said to me, How beautiful you are, beautiful of my own beauty. That is why I am drawn to you and inclined to love you. These words left me more confused than ever. May everything be for his glory. He continued to show himself briefly and almost angry with men. My pleas for him to pour out his bitterness in me did not shake him. Without paying attention to my words, he said to me, Resignation absorbs all that is disgusting in man and makes it acceptable. It grafts into the soul my own virtues. A resigned soul is always at peace and I find in it my rest. This morning, when my sweet Jesus came, he carried me out of my body and then disappeared. Being alone, I saw 2 candelabras of fire coming down from the sky and then splitting in many flashes and in a hail rain falling on the earth, causing great torment for plants and men. The horror and vehemence of the storm was such that people could not nor pray, nor return to their homes. How do I express the fear I was experiencing? I began to pray to appease the Lord's wrath. When he came back, I noticed that he was holding in his hand an iron bar at the end of which there was a fireball. He said to me, "I have long retained my justice. It is with good reason that it wants to crack down on creatures who have dared to destroy all justice." Oh! Yes. I find no justice in man. He was totally contradicted by his words and deeds. Everything in him is only fraud and injustice, of which his heart is so invaded that he is no more than a jumble of vices. Poor men, how debased you have been! While speaking, he began to turn the bar in his hand, as if he was going to hurt someone. I said to him, "Lord, what are you doing?" He replied, "Do not be afraid, you see that fireball? It will set fire to the earth. But it will strike only the wicked, the vouchers will be spared." I resumed, "Ah! Lord! Who is good? We are all evil. I beg you, turn your gaze, not to us, but to your infinite mercy. Thus, you will be appeased." Jesus continues. Justice has truth as its daughter. I am the eternal truth and I cannot mislead. Thus the righteous soul makes the truth shine in all its deeds. Since she possesses the light of truth, if anyone tries to deceive her, she immediately flushes out the deception. And, with this light, she deceives neither her neighbor nor herself and cannot be deceived. Justice and truth are the fruit of simplicity, which is another of my qualities. I am so simple that I can penetrate everywhere and nothing can stop me. I penetrate heaven and the abyss, good and evil. Even penetrating evil, my being cannot get dirty or receive the slightest shade. The same is true of the soul which, through justice and truth, possesses the magnificent fruit of simplicity. This soul penetrates the sky, penetrates the hearts to lead them to me, and penetrates everything that is good. When she is among sinners and sees the evil they are doing, she is not soiled. For, by its simplicity, it quickly dismisses evil. Simplicity is so beautiful that my heart is deeply touched by a single glance of a simple soul. This soul is admired by angels and men. This morning, after a short wait, my adorable Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, this morning, I want to make you completely conform to me. I want to that you think with my thoughts, that you look with my eyes, that you listen with my ears, that you speak with my language, let you act with my hands, that you walk with my feet, and that you love with my heart." Then Jesus united his attributes, those mentioned above, with mine. And I realized that he was also giving me his own form. Moreover, he has given me the grace to use it as he himself does. Then he said, "I pour out great graces in you. Keep them well." I replied, "Being filled with so much misery, I am afraid, O my beloved Jesus, to misuse your graces. What I fear most is my language, which, too often, makes me miss charity towards my neighbor." Jesus continues. Don't be afraid, I'll teach you how to talk to your neighbor. First, when you are told something about your neighbor, ask yourself and see if you are not guilty of this defect yourself. For, in this case, to want to correct your neighbor would be to scandalize him and to outrage myself. Second, if you do not have this defect, stand up and try to speak as I would have spoken. This way you will speak with my own language. And so, you will not fail in charity. On the contrary, by your words, you will do good to your neighbor and to yourself, and you will give me honor and glory. He came forward again this morning, but briefly, again threatening to send punishments. As I worked to appease him, he moved away as fast as lightning. The last time he came, he showed himself crucified. I placed myself near him to kiss his most holy wounds, doing acts of worship. Suddenly, instead of seeing Jesus, it was my own form that I saw. I was very surprised and said, Lord, what's going on? Am I worshipping myself? I can't do that. So he returned to his own form and told me, don't be surprised if I borrowed your form. Since I suffer continuously in you. What is amazing that I borrowed your physiognomy? Besides, if I make you suffer, isn't it to make you an image of me? I remained confused and Jesus disappeared. May everything contribute to his glory and may his holy name be blessed forever. This morning, my sweetest Jesus had a festive heart. He held in his hands a bouquet of the most beautiful flowers. Snuggling in my heart. Sometimes he surrounded his head with these flowers. Sometimes he held them in his hands, his heart in joy and joy. He celebrated as if he had achieved a great victory. Turning to me, he said to me, my beloved, this morning I have come to put the virtues in order in your heart. The other virtues may remain separate from each other. But charity binds and orders all others. This is what I want to do in you regarding charity. I said to him, my one and only good, how could you do this, given that I am so mean and full of flaws? If charity begets order, aren't these defects and sins the cause of the disorder that defile my soul? Jesus continues, I will purify everything and charity will put everything back in order. Moreover, when I let a soul participate in the sufferings of my passion, there can be no grave sins. At most some involuntary venial faults. But, being of fire, my love consumes all imperfection. Then, from his heart, Jesus made a stream of honey flow into my heart. With this honey, he purified my whole interior. Thus, everything in me was put back in order, unified and marked with the seal of charity. Then I felt that I was leaving my body and that I entered the vault of heaven in the company of my kind Jesus. It was a great feast everywhere, in heaven, on earth, and in purgatory. All were flooded with new joy and jubilation. Several souls came out of purgatory and ascended to heaven like lightning, to attend the feast of our Queen Mother. I, too, sneaked into this huge crowd, composed of angels, saints and souls from purgatory freshly arrived. This sky was so huge that, in comparison, the heavens we see on earth look like a small hole. Looking all around, I saw only a fiery sun spreading dazzling rays that penetrated me and made me crystal transparent. Thus, my little spots appeared clearly, as well as the infinite distance between the Creator and his creature. Each ray of this sun had a special accent. Some shone with the holiness of God, others of its purity, others of its power, others of his wisdom, and so on for the other virtues and attributes of God. Before this spectacle, my soul touched its nothingness, its miseries, and its poverty. She felt devastated and fell face down in front of the eternal sun that no one can see face to face. The Blessed Virgin, on the other hand, seemed totally absorbed in God. To be able to participate in the feast of this Queen Mother, we had to look from inside the sun. Nothing could be seen from other observation points. While I was all annihilated before the Divine Sun, baby Jesus, whom the Queen Mother held in her arms, said to me, our mom is in the sky. I give you the task of acting like my mother on earth. My life is continually object contempt, pain, and abandonment on the part of men. During her stay on earth, my mother was my faithful companion in all my sufferings. She always wanted to relieve me in everything, to the extent of her strengths. So you too, by imitating my mother, will keep me faithfully company in all my sufferings by suffering in my place as much as possible. And when you can't, you'll at least try to comfort me. Know, however, that I want you everything to me. I will be jealous of your slightest breath if it is not dedicated to me. When I see that you are not totally focused on pleasing me, I will leave you no rest. Afterward, I started acting like his mom. Oh! What attention I had to exercise to be pleasant to him. In order to please him, I couldn't even look elsewhere. Sometimes he wanted to sleep, sometimes he wanted to drink, sometimes he wanted to be caressed. I always had to be ready to fulfill all his desires. He told me, "Mom, I have a headache. Oh, please relieve me." Immediately I examined his head and, finding some thorns in it, I took them away from him and made him rest, supporting his head with my arms. While he was resting, he suddenly stood up and said, "I feel such a weight and suffering in my heart that I feel like I am dying. Try to see what's there." As I scrutinized the interior of his heart, I found all the instruments of his passion. I removed them one by one and placed them in my own heart. Then, seeing that he was relieved, I began to stroke and kiss him, saying, "My one and only treasure. You didn't even let me attend our Queen Mother's feast, nor hear the first hymns that angels and saints sang for her." He replied. The first hymn they sang was the Hail Mary, since, by this prayer, she is addressed the most beautiful praises, the highest honors. And that, upon hearing it, the joy she felt in becoming Mother of God is renewed. If you want, we will recite it together in his honor. When you come to heaven, I will make you relieve the joy you would have tasted if you had been at the feast with the angels and saints in heaven. So we recited together the first part of Hail Mary. Oh, how sweet and moving it was to greet our most holy Mother in the company of her beloved Son. Every word Jesus spoke carried an immense light by which I understood many things about the Blessed Virgin. But, how do I tell all these things given my incapacity? I am therefore silent on them. Jesus still wants me to act like his mother. He manifested himself to me in the form of the most gracious little baby in the process of cry. In order to soothe his crying, I started singing while holding him in my arms. When I sang, he stopped crying. But as soon as I stopped, he would start crying again. I prefer to remain silent about what I was singing. First, because I do not remember very well, being then out of my body, and also because, in any case, we cannot remember everything that happens. I prefer to remain silent too because I think my words were silly. However, Lady Obedience, often very impertinent, does not want to give up. So I'm going to please her, even if what I'm going to write is far-fetched. It is said that Lady Obedience is blind. But, as for me, I believe that she sees everything, since she notices the slightest little thing, and that, when we do not do what she asks, it becomes impertinent to the point of leaving us no rest. Therefore, to keep the peace with her, and given what it is so good when obeyed, and that everything can be obtained through it, I will write what I remember singing to Jesus. Little baby, you are small and strong, from you I expect all comfort. Little baby, graceful and beautiful, even the stars are in love with you. Little baby, take my heart, fill it with your love. Little baby, tender little, make me little baby too. Little baby, you are a paradise, I delight in your eternal smile. This morning, after receiving communion, I said to my kind Jesus, how is it that this virtue of obedience is so impertinent, and even sometimes capricious? He replied, if this noble lady is as you say, it is because it must kill all vices. Since she must give death, she must be strong and courageous. To achieve its ends, it must sometimes use whims and impertinence. This being necessary for those who have to kill the body, yet so fragile, it is even more necessary when it is necessary to kill the vices and passions, which can come back to life when we thought we had killed them. Oh! Yes! There is no true peace without obedience. If one believes that one enjoys a certain peace without it, it is a false peace. Disobedience fits well with our passions, but obedience never. When one moves away from obedience, one moves away from me, the king of this noble virtue. And we run to its loss. Obedience kills the own will and pours divine graces into the soul in torrents. It can be said that the obedient soul no longer does its own will but that of God. Can one know a more wonderful and holy life than life in God's will? In the practice of other virtues, even the most sublime, Self-love can always slip in. But, in the practice of obedience, never. This morning, when my adorable Jesus came, I said to him, "My beloved Jesus, I sometimes feel like everything I write is absurd." He replied, "My word is not only truth, but also light. When light enters a dark room, what does it do? It casts out darkness and makes visible the objects in it, whether ugly or beautiful, or whether the room is in order or messy. According to the condition of the chamber, we can then guess what kind of person inhabits it. In this example, the chamber represents the human soul. When the light of truth enters it, it casts out darkness and we can distinguish the true from the false, the temporal of the eternal. As a result, the soul can remove from it vices and put order in its virtues. My light is holy, it is my very divinity. Thus she can only transmit holiness and order to the soul into which she enters. This one has the impression that lights, patience, humility, of charity, etc., emanate from her. If my word produces such signs in you, why fear? Then Jesus prayed to the Father for me, saying, "Most Holy Father, I pray for this soul. Let her perfectly fulfill our most holy will in everything. Make her, O adorable Father, that her actions be in conformity with mine, without any distinction, so that I may realize in her my purposes." How can I describe the force that was infused into me as a result of Jesus' prayer? My soul was clothed with such strength that I felt able to endure 1,000 martyrdoms to fulfill God's most holy will, if it asked me to. May the Lord be thanked forever, always so merciful to the poor sinner that I am. After spending 2 days in pain, my benevolent Jesus was full of gentleness and affability. Internally, I thought to myself, "The Lord is good to me, but I find nothing in me that can please him." Jesus said to me, "My beloved, you feel no satisfaction if you do not find yourself in my presence, busy talking to me and pleasing me only. Likewise I find my pleasure and consolation to come to you, to be with you and to talk with you. You can't understand the influence that a soul, whose sole purpose is to please me, can have on my heart, and the force of attraction it exerts on me. I feel so connected to this soul that I feel compelled to do what it desires." I understood that he spoke this way because, in recent days, when I was suffering terribly, I kept repeating internally, "My Jesus, all out of love for you. May these sufferings be acts of praise and tribute to you. May they be so many voices that glorify you and proof of my love for you." Full of kindness and majesty, my dear Jesus continues to come. He said to me, "The purity of my gaze shines in all your acts, which are thus transformed into splendors that console me from the filthy things I see in creatures." At these words, I became confused and did not dare to say anything. Wanting to brighten me up, Jesus then said to me, "Tell me, what do you desire?" I replied, "When you are there, how could I desire anything else?" He asked me several times to tell him what I wanted. Looking at him, I saw the beauty of his virtues and I said to him, "My most sweet Jesus, give me your virtues." Opening his heart, he brought out rays corresponding to his various virtues which, penetrating into my heart, strengthened my own virtues. He said to me, "What else do you desire?" Remembering that in the last few days, a special pain prevented my senses from dissolving into God, I replied, "My benevolent Jesus, let the pain not prevent me from getting lost in you." By placing his hand on this painful part of my body, he reduced the violence of the spasms so that I could better gather and lose myself in him. This morning, seeing my sweet Jesus, I was afraid that it was not him but the devil wanting to deceive me. Seeing my fear, he said to me, "When it is I who visits the soul, all its inner powers are annihilated and it recognizes its nothingness." Seeing the soul thus annihilated, my love is transformed into many streams coming to strengthen it in the good. When it's the devil, the opposite happens. This morning, my beloved Jesus carried me out of my body. He showed me the decadence of faith in men as well as preparations for war. I said to him, O Lord, the state of the world on the religious level is sad to split the soul. It seems to me that religion, which ennobles man and makes him tend towards an eternal goal, is no longer recognized. The saddest thing is that religion is ignored by the very people who call themselves religious and who should give their lives to defend and revive it. With a grieving look, Jesus said to me, My daughter, the reason why men live like beasts, it is that they have lost their religious sense. Even sadder times are coming for them, because of the deep blindness in which they immersed themselves. My heart suffers to see them like this. The blood that will be shed by all kinds of people, secular and religious, will revive this holy religion and wash the rest of humanity. And civilizing them again, the rediscovered religion will make them regain their nobility. It is therefore necessary that blood is shed and that the churches themselves are almost all destroyed, so that they can be restored and regain their original prestige and splendor. I am silent. The cruel torments that men will have to endure in the times to come, because I don't remember it very well, and because I don't see it very clearly. If the Lord wants me to talk about it, He will give me more light and then I can write more about it. For now, I'll stop here. After the confessor asked me in the name of obedience to say to Jesus, when he would come, I can't talk to you, walk away. I thought it was a farce and not a real directive. Then when Jesus came, almost forgetting the order received, I said to him, My good Jesus, see what the Father wants to do. Jesus answered me, Self-denial, my daughter. I said, But, Lord, this is a serious thing. This is about the rejection of you, how can I do this? For the second time, Jesus says, Self-denial. I continued, But, Lord, what do you say? Do you really believe that I can live without you? For the third time, Jesus said to me, My daughter, self-denial. Then he disappeared. Who could say how I felt when I saw that Jesus wanted that I be willing to obey on this point? When I arrived, the confessor asked me if I had obeyed him. After telling him how everything had gone, he repeated his instruction, namely that, for no consideration, I was not to speak to Jesus, my one and only support, and that I had to push him away if he showed up. Having understood, therefore, that what he was asking of me was really in the name of obedience, I said to myself internally, Fiat voluntas tua in this too. Oh! How much it cost me! What a cruel martyrdom! It was as if a nail pierced my heart from side to side. My habit of calling Jesus, my only good, of languishing unceasingly after him, is part of my being as much as my breathing and the beating of my heart. Wanting to stop this, it's like wanting to stop someone from breathing or letting their heart beat. How can we live like this? However, obedience must prevail. Oh my God, what pain, what torture! How can one prevent a heart from languishing after the being who is his whole life? How to stop a heart from beating? With all his energy, my will strove to hold back my heart. But what constant vigilance he needed! From time to time, my will would become tired and discouraged. My heart was saved by calling Jesus. Realizing this, my will was more trying to stop my heart. But she often missed her shot. That is why it seemed to me that I was continually in a state of disobedience. Oh! What a contrast in my life, what a bloody war, what agony for my poor heart! My suffering was such that I thought I was dying. If I could have died, it would have been a comfort to me. I lived the throes of death without dying. I had shed profuse tears all day and all night. And I was in my usual state. My benevolent Jesus came, and I, obliged by obedience, said to him, Lord, do not come, for obedience does not allow it. With compassion and wanting to strengthen me, Jesus made a great sign of the cross on me with his creative hand and left me. How do I describe the purgatory I was in? I was not allowed to rush to my one good, or even to call him or languish after him. Ah! The blessed souls of purgatory can at least call him, rush out, cry out their distress to their beloved. They are only forbidden to possess it. While I, too, am deprived of these consolations. I only cried all night. My weak nature could no longer take it. The adorable Jesus came. As he seemed to want to talk to me, I immediately told him, "My dear life, I can't talk to you. Please do not come, for obedience does not allow it. If you want to make your will known, go and see it." As I spoke, I saw the confessor. Approaching him, Jesus said to him, "This is impossible for my souls. I keep them so immersed in me, so that we form a single substance, that it becomes impossible to distinguish us from each other. It's like when two substances are mixed, they transfuse into each other. If we then want to separate them, it is impossible. Likewise, it is impossible to separate my souls from me." Having said that, he disappeared. I stayed with my sorrow, even greater than before. My heart was beating so hard that I felt my chest crack. Afterwards, I could not explain how, I found myself out of my body. Forgetting the order received, I walked through the vault of heaven crying, shouting and seeking my sweet Jesus. Suddenly, I saw him walking towards me and throwing himself into my arms all burning and languorous. Having quickly remembered the instruction received, I said to him, "Lord, don't tempt me this morning. Don't you know that obedience does not want?" He replied, "The confessor has sent me, that's why I came." I said, "That's not true. Would you be a demon coming to deceive me and make me lack obedience?" He continued, "I am not a demon. I say, if you are not a demon, let us make the sign of the cross together." So, both of us, made the sign of the cross. Then I added, "If it is true that the confessor sent you, let us go together to see him so that he can determine whether you are Jesus Christ or a demon. Only then will I be convinced." So we went to the confessor. As Jesus was a child, I put him in his arms, saying, "My Father, discern for yourself, is this my sweet Jesus, or a demon?" While the child was in the Father's arms, I told him, "If you are really Jesus, kiss the confessor's hand." I thought that, if it were the Lord, he would lower himself to kiss the hand of the confessor, and that, if it were the devil, he would refuse. Jesus kissed not the hand of man, but that of the priest clothed with authority. Then the confessor seemed to me to discuss with him to see if he was Jesus. Seeing that this was the case, he handed it to me. Despite this, my poor heart could not savor the caresses of my beloved Jesus. Because I still felt bound by obedience and thus, I did not want to open it or even pronounce a single word of love. O holy obedience, how powerful you are! In these days of martyrdom, I see you as the most powerful warrior. Armed from head to toe, with swords, stingers and arrows, and equipped with all instruments to injure. And when you realize that my poor, tired, and saddened heart needs comfort, to find his refreshing source, his life, the center that attracts him like a magnet. Looking at me with your 1,000 eyes, you inflict cruel wounds on all sides on me. Ah! Please have mercy on me and don't be so cruel. As I entertained these thoughts, I heard the voice of my adorable Jesus saying in my ear, "Obedience was everything to me and I want it to be everything to you. It was obedience that gave birth to me and it was obedience that made me die. The wounds I carry on my body are all wounds and marks that obedience has inflicted on me. You're right to say that she's like the most powerful warrior, armed with all sorts of weapons to hurt. In fact, she did not leave me a single drop of my blood. She tore my flesh to pieces. She dislocated my bones while my poor heart, exhausted and bloody, was looking for someone compassionate to console him. Acting as the cruelest of tyrants, obedience was satisfied only after having sacrificed me on the cross and to have seen me take my last breath as a victim of love. And why is that? Because the role of this very powerful warrior is to sacrifice souls. She is only concerned with waging the fierce war against souls who do not sacrifice themselves entirely. It doesn't matter to him whether a soul suffers or not, whether he lives or dies. It aims only to win, not taking care of anything else. That's why it's called victory. For it leads to all victories. When the soul seems to die, that's when its real life begins. To what greatness has obedience not led me? By her. I have conquered death. I crushed hell. I have freed the man from his chains. I have opened the sky and, like a victorious king, I have taken possession of my kingdom, not only for me, but for all my children who have benefited from my redemption. Ah! Yes. It is true that it cost me my life. But the word obedience sounds like sweet music to my ear. That's why I love obedient souls so much. I now pick up where I left off. After a while, the confessor came. After passing on to him the words said above, he maintained his instruction, that is, that I must continue to act in the same way with Jesus. I said to him, Father, let me at least leave my heart free to say to Jesus when he comes, do not come, for we cannot speak to each other. The confessor replied, do what you can to stop him. If you can't, leave him free. With this somewhat mixed instruction, my heart went back to life. But that didn't stop him from still being tortured in 1,000 ways. In fact, when Lady Obedience saw that my heart stopped beating for a while seeking his Creator in the hope of being able to rest in him to renew his strength, she fell on me and wounded me from all sides with her claws. The mere repetition of the sad refrain, do not come, for we cannot talk to each other, was for me the cruelest of martyrs. While I was in my usual state, my sweet Jesus came and I told him the sad refrain in question. So, without more, he left. Another time, when I told him, do not come, for obedience does not allow it, he told me, my daughter, may the light of my passion always be present in your mind. For, at the sight of my very bitter sufferings, yours will seem minimal to you. Moreover, as I reflect on the main cause of my suffering, which is sin, your slightest imperfections will seem serious to you. On the other hand, if you do not fix your gaze on me, the slightest suffering will become a burden on you. And you will consider your serious faults as unimportant. Then he disappeared. After some time, the confessor came, and when I asked him if I should continue like this, he said to me, no, you can tell him anything you want and keep him with you for as long as you want. It freed me in the sense that I no longer had to struggle as much against the powerful warrior that is obedience. If he had continued with the same instruction, he would have quickly managed to make me die physically. In reality, it would have been a great victory for me. For I would thus have united myself to my supreme good for good and no longer at intervals as before. Needless to say, I would have greatly thanked Lady Obedience. I would have sung to him the song of obedience, that is, the song of victories. Then, laughing, I would have laughed at his strength. While I was writing these lines, a radiant and enchanting eye appeared to me and a voice said to me, and I would have united myself with you and I would have laughed with you, for that would also have been my victory. I replied, O dear Obedience, after laughing together, I would have left you at the door of paradise saying goodbye to you and not to the next one, so that you never have to deal with you again. Also, I would have been very careful not to let you in. This morning, I was so dejected and found myself so mean that I could hardly stand myself. When Jesus arrived, I told him about my miserable condition. He told me, my daughter, don't be discouraged. This is my usual way of acting. Bring the soul to perfection little by little and not all at once, so that it is always aware that he is missing something and that she has to make every effort to obtain what she lacks. Thus, it pleases me more and sanctifies itself even more. And I, attracted by his actions, I feel compelled to grant him new heavenly favors. In addition, a totally divine exchange is established between the soul and me. If, on the other hand, the soul possessed in it the fullness of perfection, that is to say all the virtues, she would not have to make any effort. And it would lack the necessary beginning, so that the fire may be lit between the Creator and his creature. May the Lord be blessed forever. Jesus came as usual, but in a completely new aspect. It looked like a tree trunk, with 3 roots. Came out of his wounded heart and bent down to penetrate mine, from which emerged many charged branches, flowers, fruits, pearls, and precious stones that shone like the most resplendent stars. In the shade of this tree, my kind Jesus was having a lot of fun. Especially since several pearls falling from the tree formed a magnificent adornment for his most holy humanity. He said to me, "My dearest daughter, the 3 roots of the tree trunk are faith, hope and charity. The fact that this trunk comes out of my heart to penetrate yours means that all the good that a soul possesses comes from me, and that creatures possess nothing but their nothingness, which gives me the freedom to penetrate into them to do what I want. However, there are souls who oppose me and choose to do their own will. For them, the trunk does not produce branches, fruits, or anything good. The branches of this tree, with its flowers, fruits, pearls, and precious stones, are the different virtues that a soul possesses. What brings such a beautiful tree to life? Obviously, these are its roots. This means that faith, hope and charity encompass all and are the foundation of the tree which cannot produce anything without them. I understood that the flowers represent the virtues, the fruits, the sufferings, and that pearls and precious stones represent the sufferings experienced out of pure love for God. That is why these objects form such a magnificent adornment for our Lord. Sitting in the shade of this tree, Jesus looked at me with paternal tenderness. Then, in an irresistible outpouring of love, he held me tightly against him, saying, "How beautiful you are! You are my dove, my beloved home, my living temple where I enjoy dwelling with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Your continual thirst for me consoles me. Continual offenses that I receive from creatures. Know that the love I have for you is so great that I have to partially hide it, so that you do not lose your mind and die. Indeed, if I completely manifested my love to you, not only would you lose your mind, but you could no longer live. Your weak nature would be consumed by the flames of this love." As he spoke, I felt confused and felt like I was sinking into the abyss of my nothingness because I saw myself filled with imperfections. Above all, I noted my ingratitude and coldness before so many graces received from the Lord. But I hope that everything can contribute to his glory and honor, and that he will, in a surge of his love, overcome my hardness of heart. This morning, my adorable Jesus came. As I was afraid that it was the devil, I told him, "Let me make the sign of the cross on your forehead." After doing so, I felt reassured. My beloved Jesus looked tired and wanted to rest in me. As a result of my sufferings of the last days, I was also tired, especially because his visits were very rare and because I felt the need to rest in him, too. After a brief exchange, he said to me, "The life of the heart is love. I am like a fever-burning patient looking for relief from the fire that devours him. My fever is love. Where can I find the right relief from the fire that consumes me? I find it in the sufferings and labors of my beloved souls who live them only out of love for me. Very often I wait for the right moment for a soul to turn to me and say to me, 'Lord, it is only out of love for you that I accept this suffering.' Ah! Yes. These are the best reliefs for me. They rejoice me and extinguish the fire that consumes me." Then Jesus threw himself into my arms, all languorous, to rest. While he was resting, I understood many things about the words he had just told me, especially those about the sufferings experienced out of love for him. Oh! What a priceless currency of value! If everyone knew, there would be competition between us to suffer more. But I believe that we are all too short-sighted to recognize the value of this currency. This morning I was a little upset, especially because of the fear that it is not Jesus but a demon, and that my state is not willed by God. My adorable Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, I don't want you to waste your time thinking about this. You let yourself be distracted from me and my food from you is lacking. I want you to think only of loving me and remaining totally abandoned to me, for, in this way, you will be able to offer me food that is very pleasant to me. Not only from time to time as now. Goal continuously. Don't you think it's by abandoning to me your will, by loving me, by becoming food for me, your God, that you will find your greatest satisfaction?" Then he showed me his heart containing 3 globes of light, which later formed only one. He continued his presentation. "The globes of light that you see in my heart are faith, hope and charity, that I have offered as gifts to suffering humanity to make it happy. Today, I want to give you a special gift." As he spoke, many rays, globes of light sprang up and surrounded my soul like a kind of net. He continued, "This is how I desire you to occupy your soul. First of all, fly on the wings of faith. And, with its light, in which you immerse yourself, you will be able to know and acquire more and more knowledge about me, I your God. By knowing me more, you will feel devastated and your nothingness will no longer find support. So, rise higher and plunge into the immense sea of hope, formed of all the merits that I have acquired during my mortal life, as well as the pains of my passion offered as a gift to humanity. It is only by these merits that you can hope to possess the immense goods of faith. There is no other way. When you take possession of my merits as if they were yours, your nothing will no longer feel dissolved in nothingness, but will feel revived. He will be embellished and enriched, thus attracting divine glances upon him. The soul will have lost its shyness, and hope will give him strength and courage, so that it becomes stable as a pillar in the middle of bad weather. That is, the various tribulations of life will not shake him in any way. Through hope, not only does the soul plunge without fear in the immense riches of faith, but it appropriates them. It goes so far as to appropriate God Himself. Ah! Yes! Hope allows the soul to get everything it wants. It is the gate of heaven, the only way to enter it. Because who hopes for everything, gets everything. And when the soul has succeeded in appropriating God Himself, it will find itself before the immense ocean of charity. Taking with it faith and hope, she will immerse herself in it to become one with her God. My most kind Jesus added, if faith is king and charity is queen, hope is the mediating and pacifying mother. There may be discrepancies between faith and charity, but hope being a bond of peace, it converts everything into peace. Hope is support, refreshment. When the soul rises by faith, she sees the beauty and holiness of God and the love by which she is loved by Him. Thus, she is inclined to love God. However, conscious His misery, the few things she knows how to do, and His lack of love, she feels uncomfortable and troubled. She hardly dares to approach God. So, this mediating mother is placed between faith and charity and begins to play her role as a peacemaker. It restores peace to the soul. She pushes her to get up. She gives her new strength and leads her before the King Faith and the Queen Charity. She apologizes to them in the name of the soul. She gives him a new outpouring of merits and begs them to receive her. Then faith and charity, the eyes fixed on this mother mediator so tender and compassionate, welcome the soul. And so, God finds in her His delights. Likewise, the soul finds its delights in God. O holy hope, how admirable you are! A soul filled with you is like a noble traveler on his way to take possession of a land that will be all his fortune. As he is unknown and crosses lands that do not belong to him. Some make fun of him. Others insult him. Some tear off his clothes. Others go so far as to beat him and even threaten him with death. What does the noble traveler do in the midst of all these annoyances? Is he troubled? Not at all. On the contrary, he mocks those who give him all these difficulties. For he is convinced that the more he suffers, the more he will be honored and glorified when he takes possession of his land. He even makes people torment him more. He always remains calm and enjoys an almost perfect peace. In the midst of insults, he remains so calm that he sleeps in the womb of his much-desired God. While others around him remain awake. What gives such peace and firmness to this traveler? It is the hope of eternal goods. As they belong to him by right, he is willing to do anything to possess them. Thinking that they will be his, he loves them more and more. This is how hope leads to love. How do I describe all that my beloved Jesus showed me? I would rather say nothing. But I see that Lady Obedience, instead of being friendly, takes on the warrior look and seizes his weapons to make war on me and hurt me. Oh! Please don't take up arms so quickly, put your claws in, calm down. For I will obey you as best I can so that we remain friends. When a soul is plunged into the immense sea of charity, she knows ineffable delights and she relishes unspeakable joys. Everything becomes love in her. His sighs, its heartbeat and his thoughts are so many melodious voices that she makes resonate in the ears of her God whom she loves so much. These voices are filled with love and call God. And he, attracted and wounded by them, responds with his own sighs and heartbeats as well as with his entire divine being, continually calling the soul to him. Who could say how much the soul is hurt by these divine callings? She begins to delirium as if under the effect of a high fever. She runs, almost crazy, and will immerse herself in the heart of her beloved in order to find a refreshment. She torrents the divine delights. Intoxicated with love, she composes hymns of love for her very sweet husband. How to say everything that happens between the soul and God? How can we speak of this charity which is God Himself? I see an immense light and my mind remains stunned. I sometimes focus on one point, sometimes on another. As I try to describe what I see, I'm just stammering. Not knowing what to do, I remain silent for now. I believe that Lady Obedience will forgive me. Because, if she got angry with me, she wouldn't be right this time. She would have all the wrongs, since she did not give me a greater ease of expression. Have you understood, Very Reverend Lady Obedience? Let's keep the peace without arguing any further. But who would have thought so? Even if she is the one who is wrong and I have difficulty expressing myself. Lady Obedience took the fly and began to act like a cruel tyrant, going so far as to prevent me from seeing my kind good, my one and only consolation. As can be seen, this lady sometimes acts like a little girl. When she wants something and she doesn't get it by asking politely, she then filled the house with her cries and tears until her request was granted. Well done! I didn't think you were like that. Even if I stammer, you want me to write about charity. Oh my God, only you can make it more reasonable. Because it's obvious that it can't go on like this. Please, Obedience, give me back my sweet Jesus, do not deprive me of the vision of my greatest good. I promise you that, even if I stammer, I will write as you please. I only ask you for the grace to let me rest for a few days. Because my mind is too small. He can no longer bear to be immersed in this vast ocean that is divine charity. Especially because I see more clearly my miseries and my ugliness. And seeing God's love for me, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel that my weak nature will collapse, not being able to take it anymore. Until then, I will take care of making other writings. That said, I continue with my poor writings. My mind being busy doing what I have already mentioned, I thought to myself, what good will these writings be if I don't put them into practice myself? They will be used for my condemnation. While I was thinking like this, Jesus came and said to me, these writings will serve to make known the one who speaks to you and dwells in you. And if they do not serve you, my light will enlighten those who read them. I can't say how mortified I was at thought that those who read these writings could benefit from the graces attached to them, and not me who receives them and puts them on paper. Won't these writings condemn me? At the mere thought that they will fall into the hands of other people, my heart is overwhelmed with pain. In my deep sorrow, I said to myself, what is the purpose of my condition if my conviction is to result? Then my most kind Jesus came back and said to me, my life was necessary for the salvation of the world. As I can no longer live on earth, I choose who I want to replace me, that the redemption may continue. This is the raison d'être of your state. By the words that my sweet Jesus told me yesterday, I felt a nail pierce my heart. Always so benevolent towards the wretched sinner that I am. He came and said to me with compassion, my daughter, I don't want you to grieve like this any more. Know that everything I make you write is nothing but a reflection of yourself and of the perfection to which I have led your soul. Ah! My God! How reluctant I am to write these words, since they do not seem to me to be true. I still don't understand what virtue and perfection mean. But obedience wants me to write. And it's better for me not to resist so as not to be struggling with her. This is all the more so since she has a two-sided face. If I do what she says, she shows herself as a lady and caresses me as the most faithful friend, promising me all the goods of heaven and earth. If, on the other hand, she detects the shadow of a difficulty in her relationship with me, then, without warning, she turns into a warrior with all the weapons to hurt and destroy. Oh my Jesus, what kind of virtue is obedience so that his thought alone will make us tremble? I said to Jesus, my good Jesus, what is the point of granting me so many graces if they fill my whole life with bitterness, especially because of the hours during which I am deprived of your presence? The mere fact of knowing who you are and who I am deprived of is for me a martyrdom. Your graces only serve to make me live in continual bitterness. Jesus answered me, when a person has enjoyed the sweetness of a sweet dish and is then forced to take a bitter dish, he must double his desire for sweetness in order to forget the bitter. It is good that this is the case. Because, if she always tasted sweet without ever tasting bitter, she would not appreciate sweet as much. If, on the other hand, she always ate bitter dishes, without ever having tasted sweet, she could not desire sweet dishes, since she would not know them. Thus, both are useful. I continued, my Jesus, so patient with my miserable and ungrateful soul, forgive me. I feel like this time I was too curious. He continued, don't be so disturbed. It is I who raise difficulties in your inner self in order to have the opportunity to converse with you and to teach you. Internally, I thought to myself, if these writings fell into the hands of a person, he might say, she must be a good Christian since the Lord bestows so many graces on her, ignoring that, despite everything, I am still so bad. This is how people can deceive themselves. As much on what is good as on what is bad. Ah! Lord! Only you know the truth and the bottom of hearts. While I was entertaining these thoughts, my Jesus came and said to me, my beloved, what if people knew that you are my defender and theirs? I replied, my Jesus, what do you say? He continued, isn't it true? May you defend me against the suffering they inflict on me. By placing yourself between them and me, that you take on yourself the blows that they want to attack me as well as those whom I should bring upon them? And if, sometimes, you do not absorb the blows in my place, it is because I do not allow it. And this to your greatest regret and accompanied by your complaints to me. Could you deny that? No, Lord, I replied, I cannot deny this. But I recognize that this is something that you yourself have infused into me. That is why I say that if I do this, it is not because I am good. That's also why I feel so confused when I hear you say such things. This morning, my adorable Jesus came and carried me out of my body, but, to my great regret, I only saw him from behind. Despite my pleas to let me see his holy face, nothing changed. I thought, could it be because of my lack of obedience to writing that he doesn't want to show me his adorable face? I was crying. After letting me cry for a while, he turned around and told me, I don't take your refusals into account because your will is so united with mine that you can only want what I want. So, despite your reluctance, you feel attracted as if by a magnet to do what is asked of you. Your repugnances only serve to make your virtue of obedience more beautiful and luminous. That's why I don't know your refusals. Then I contemplated his beautiful face and felt an indescribable contentment. I said to her, my very sweet love, if it is for me such a delight to see you, how could it be for our Queen Mother when she carried you in her very pure womb? What contentments, what graces have you not granted him? He replied, my daughter. The delights and graces poured into them were so great and so numerous that what I am by nature, my mother became by grace. Since she was sinless, my grace reigned freely in her. There is nothing of my being that I have not communicated to him. At that moment, I thought I saw our Queen Mother as another God, but with one difference, for God, divinity is by nature, whereas for Mary Most Holy, everything was granted to her by grace. I was stunned. I say to Jesus, my dear good, our mother was able to receive so many gifts because you let yourself be seen intuitively by her. I would like to know how you manifest yourself to me. Is it by abstract vision or by intuitive vision? Who knows, maybe it's not even out of abstract vision. Jesus answered me, I'd like you to understand the difference between the two. Through the abstract vision, the soul contemplates God. Whereas, through the intuitive vision, the soul enters into God and participates in the divine being. How many times have you not participated in my being? These sufferings, which seem almost natural to you, this purity that allows you to no longer feel your body, and many other things. Didn't I communicate these things to you by attracting you to me intuitively? I exclaimed. Ah! Lord, this is so true. And how little gratitude I have expressed to you for all this. How little have I corresponded to so many graces. I blush just thinking about it. Please forgive me and let heaven and earth know that I am the object of your infinite mercy. I lived through hell for over an hour. Indeed, while I was looking at an image of the child Jesus, a thought, lightning fast, said to the child, how ugly you are. I tried to ignore this thought and not to let myself be disturbed by her in order to avoid the trap of the demon. Despite my efforts, this diabolical lightning flash penetrated my heart. And it seemed to me that I hated Jesus. Oh! Yes! I felt like I was in hell with the damned. I felt love turned into hate in me. Oh my God, what suffering it is to feel unable to love you. I said to Jesus, Lord, it is true that I am not worthy to love you, but at least accept this suffering that I feel now, wanting to love you without power. After spending more than an hour in this hell, I came out of it thanks to God. How do I express how much my poor heart was afflicted and weakened by this war between hatred and love? I was exhausted, almost lifeless. Then I returned to my usual state, but overwhelmed by this deep exhaustion. My heart and all my inner powers which, usually, seek their unique good with indescribable ardor and stop only when they have found it. Then rest and savor it with the most exquisite contentment, this time, were inert. Oh my God, what a cruel blow to my heart! Then my benevolent Jesus came and his consoling presence immediately made me forget that I had visited hell. So much so that I didn't even ask Jesus for forgiveness. My inner powers, so deeply humiliated and tired, were now resting in him. Everything was silent. There was only the exchange of a few looks of love that hurt our two hearts. After remaining deeply silent for some time, Jesus said to me, "My daughter, I'm hungry. Give me something." I replied, "I have nothing to give you." But at that very moment, I saw a loaf of bread and gave it to him. He tasted it with great pleasure. In my heart, I said to myself, "It's been a few days since he spoke to me." As if he wanted to answer my thought, he said to me, "Sometimes the husband is happy to exchange with his wife, to entrust him with his most intimate secrets. Other times, he likes to enjoy himself even better, resting while each contemplates the beauty of the other. This is necessary, because, after resting and tasting each other's beauty, they love each other more and get back to work with more force to negotiate and defend their interests. That's what I do with you. Aren't you happy?" The memory of the hour spent in hell crossed my mind and I told him, "Lord, forgive me my many offenses against you." He replied, "Don't grieve, don't be disturbed. It is I who lead the soul into the deep abyss so that I can lead it to heaven more quickly." Then he made me understand that this bread I had found was the patience with which I had endured this hour of bloody struggle. Thus, the patience deployed, the humiliation suffered and the offering to God of our sufferings during temptation are a nourishing bread for Jesus that he accepts with great pleasure. This morning, my adorable Jesus manifested himself in silence. He looked very distressed. A thick crown of thorns was sunk over his head. My inner powers were silent and I didn't dare to say a word. Seeing that his head made him suffer a lot, very delicately, I took away his crown. Ah! What painful spasms shook him! His wounds reopened and blood flowed profusely. It was to split the soul. I placed the crown on my head and he himself helped me push it deep. All this was happening in silence. What was not my surprise when, after a while, I saw that the creatures, by their offenses, put another crown on his head. O human perfidy! O incomparable patience of Jesus! He said nothing, almost avoiding looking at who his offenders were. Again, I took it away from him and, filled with tender compassion, I said to him, "My dear good, my sweet life, tell me a little. Why don't you tell me anything? You don't usually hide your secrets from me. Oh! Please! Let's talk a little together. In this way, we will be able to express the sadness and love that oppress us." He replied, "My daughter, you relieve my sorrows a lot. But know that if I don't tell you anything, it's because you always force me not to chastise my creatures. You want to oppose my righteousness. And, if I don't do what you ask, you're disappointed. And I suffer even more for not having given you satisfaction. So, to avoid any discontent on both sides, I am silent." I said to him, "My good Jesus, have you forgotten that you suffer more after exercising your righteousness? It is when I see you suffering in your creatures that I am more alert and inclined to beg not to chastise them. And when I see these same creatures turning against you, like venomous vipers ready to kill you, because they see themselves being subjected to your punishments, which moreover provokes your justice even more, then I do not have the soul to say Fiat voluntas tua." He said, "My justice can't take it any more. I feel hurt by everyone. By priests, devotees, and lay people. Especially because of the abuse of the sacraments. Some do not attach any importance to them and even despise them. Others receive them simply to make it a topic of conversation or for their own pleasure. Ah! How tortured my heart is when I see the sacraments perceived as color images or as stone statues that, from a distance, seem alive and animated but which, up close, cause disillusionment. We touch them and we only find wood, paper, stone. In short, inanimate objects. For the most part, this is how the sacraments are perceived, tinkering with only appearances. And what about those who find themselves more soiled than pure after receiving them? What about the mercantile spirit? Who reigns among those who administer them? It's sad to cry about it. They are ready to do anything for miserable pennies, to the point of losing their dignity. And where there is nothing to gain, they have no hands or feet to move a little. This mercantile spirit inhabits their souls so much that it overflows outside. So much so that the laity themselves feel the stench. They are outraged and come to no longer believe their words. Ah! No one spares me. There are some who directly offend me and others who, having means to prevent a lot of harm, do not bother. I don't know where to turn. I will chastise them in such a way as to render them powerless or even destroy them completely. Churches will remain deserted. For there will be no one to administer the sacraments there. Filled with fear, I interrupted him, saying, Lord, what do you say? If some abuse the sacraments, there are also many good people who receive them in good dispositions and who would suffer a lot if they could not receive them. He said, their number is too small. And then, their sufferings of being deprived of the sacraments will serve as reparation to me and make them victims of reparation for those who abuse them. Who could say how tormented I was by these words of my beloved Jesus? I hope that, thanks to his infinite mercy, he will calm down. This morning, my very patient Jesus was once again distressed. I did not dare to say a word to him for fear that he would repeat his plaintive discourse about priests. It is that obedience wants me to write everything, even things that affect the exercise of charity towards one's neighbor. It is so painful for me that I dare to discuss with this lady, even if she can at any moment transform in a very powerful warrior fully equipped to defeat me. I was so tense that I didn't know what to do. It seemed impossible to write about charity towards one's neighbor as a result of the lights Jesus had given me. I felt my heart darted with 1,000 spurs. My tongue stuck to my palate and I lacked courage. So I said, Dear Lady Obedience, you know how much I love you. And, because of this love, I would gladly give you my life. But I know I can't do it. See how tortured my soul is. Oh! Please don't be so ruthless towards me. Please let's discuss together what it would be most appropriate to say. So her wrath subsided a little and she dictated to me what was essential, summarizing in a few words the different things that needed to be said. At times, however, she wanted to be more explicit and I told her. It is enough that they understand the meaning by thinking. Isn't it better to say everything in one word rather than in several? Sometimes she would give in, and sometimes I would give in. All in all, I feel like we worked well together. But what patience must be used with this holy obedience. She is a real lady. For it is enough to grant her the right to lead so that she may turn into a sweet lamb, sacrificing themselves at work and allowing the soul to rest in the Lord while it protects it with his watchful eye, so that no one molests her or interrupts her sleep. And, while the soul is asleep, what is this noble lady doing? With the sweat of her brow, she hurries to complete the work, which is astounding and encourages to love it. As I write these words, I hear in my heart a voice saying, but what is obedience? What does it entail? What does it feed on? Then Jesus makes me hear his melodious voice by saying, do you want to know what obedience is? This is the epitome of love. She is the greatest, purest, most perfect love arising from the most painful sacrifice. It invites the soul to annihilate itself in order to live again in God. Being very noble and divine, obedience does not tolerate anything human in the soul. All his attention is aimed at destroying that which is not noble and divine in the soul. That is, self-love. Once this is accomplished, she works alone while she lets the soul rest in peace. Obedience is myself. Who could say how astonished and delighted I was to hear these words from my beloved Jesus? O holy obedience, how incomprehensible you are! I bow down to your feet and I adore you. Please be my guide, my master and my light on the arduous path of life. so that I can reach with certainty the eternal port. I stop here and try not to think about this virtue anymore, for otherwise I will not be able to stop talking about it. The light I receive about her is such that I could write endlessly about her. But something else is calling me. So I'm picking up where I left off. So I saw my sweet Jesus afflicted. Remembering that obedience had told me to pray with all my heart for a certain person, I have recommended him to the Lord. Afterwards, Jesus said to me, "My daughter, may all her works shine only by her virtues. I especially recommend that he does not get involved in things of family interest. If he owns property, let him give it away. He should let things happen by those to whom they belong without getting bogged down in the things of the earth. Otherwise, he will face the problems of others. Having wanted to get involved, all their weight will fall on his shoulders. Because of my mercy, I allowed that they do not become more prosperous and, on the contrary, poorer, in order to teach them that it is inappropriate for a priest to meddle in earthly things. On the other hand, and this is from my mouth, as long as they do not touch earthly things, the ministers of my sanctuary will never lack their daily bread. As for those, if I had allowed them to enrich themselves, they would have defiled their hearts and they would have had no regard for God or for their obligations. Now being disturbed and tired of their condition, they would like to shake the yoke, but they cannot. This is their punishment for meddling in things that were not their responsibility." Then I recommended to Jesus a sick person. So Jesus showed me the wounds that this person had inflicted on him. I begged him to let me fix it for her. And it seemed to me that Jesus' wounds were healing. Then, filled with benevolence, he said to me, "My daughter, today you have fulfilled the office of a skillful doctor. Because you have not only tried to apply a balm on the wounds that this patient has inflicted on me, but also to heal them. Thus, I feel relieved and soothed. I understood that by praying for a sick person, one fulfills the role of doctor for our Lord, who suffers in these beings created in his image. This morning, my sweet Jesus was not coming and I had to wait patiently for him. I said to him internally, 'My dear Jesus, come, don't make me wait any longer. I didn't see you last night and now it's getting late and you still don't arrive. See with what patience I await you. Oh! Please don't wait for me to lose patience because you will be responsible. Come! I can't take it anymore.' While I entertained these and other foolish thoughts, my only good came. But, to my dismay, he seemed almost indignant because of the creatures. I immediately said to him, 'My good Jesus, I beg you to make peace with your creatures.' He replied, 'Girl, I can't. I am like a king who would like to enter a house filled with rubbish and rot. As king, he has the right to enter and no one can stop him. He could clean this house with his own hands, which he has the desire, but he doesn't. Because this task is not worthy of his status as king. Until the house is cleaned by someone else, they will not be able to enter. So it is for me. I am a king who can and wants to enter hearts, but I need the will of creatures beforehand. They must make the rot of their sins disappear before I can enter and make peace with them. It is not worthy for my royalty to do this work myself. If they don't, I will even send them punishments. The fire of tribulations will flood them from all sides so that they may remember that God exists and that He is even the only one who can help and free them." Interrupting him, I said to him, "Lord, if you propose to send punishments, I want to join you up there. I don't want to stay on this earth anymore. How could my poor heart hold up when I saw your creatures suffering?" In a conciliatory tone, he replied, "If you join me up there, where will my residence be on earth? For now, let's think about staying together here on earth. For we will have much time together in heaven, all eternity. And then, have you forgotten your mission? The mission of being my mother on earth? While I chastise the creatures, I will come to take refuge in you." I resumed, "Ah, Lord. What has been the point of my victim status for so many years? What benefits will people have gained from it? Yet you did say that it was so that your people would be spared? Moreover, you show me no more and no less than that instead of having already arrived, these punishments will come later. Jesus continues. My daughter, don't say that. I have been forgiving because of you, and the terrible punishments planned to rage for a very long time will be shortened. Is it not a good thing that the punishments that should last for many years last only a few years? Moreover, in recent years, with wars and sudden deaths, people would not normally have had time to convert. But they did and were saved. Is that not a great good? For now, it is not necessary for me to let you know the reasons for your condition, for you and for the people. But I will do it when you are in heaven. On the day of judgment, I will manifest these reasons to all nations. So don't talk to me like that anymore. This morning I felt somewhat troubled and completely devastated. I felt like the Lord wanted to take me away from Him. What suffering! While I was in this state, my beloved Jesus came, holding a small rope in hand. He struck my heart 3 times, saying, "Peace, peace, peace." Don't you know that? The kingdom of hope is a kingdom of peace, and that justice is His ethics? When you see my justice arming itself against people, enters the kingdom of hope and, seizing you of His most powerful prerogatives, ascend to my throne and do everything you can to disarm my arm. Do this with your most eloquent, tender, and compassionate voice, with the most convincing arguments and the most ardent prayers that hope itself will dictate to you. But when you see that hope defends certain absolutely indispensable rights of justice, and that trying to oppose them would be an affront to it, then adjust and submit to justice. Terrified more than ever of having to submit to righteousness, I say to Jesus, "Ah, Lord, how can I do this? It seems impossible to me. The only thought that you must chastise your creatures is intolerable to me, for they are your images. If, at least, they didn't belong to you. What tortures me the most is to see you chastise them yourself. For these punishments are carried out on your own members. Thus, you suffer a lot yourself. Tell me, my one and only good, how can my poor heart see you suffer in this way, struck by yourself? If creatures make you suffer, they are only creatures, and, because of this, it is a little more tolerable. But when your suffering comes from yourself, I find it too difficult and I can't take it. Therefore, I cannot comply or submit." Filled with pity and very touched by my words, Jesus took on a grieving and benevolent look and said to me, "My daughter, you are right to say that I will be struck in my own limbs. Listening to you speak, I feel filled with compassion and mercy. And my heart is overflowing with tenderness. But, believe me, chastisements are necessary. And if you don't want me to hit the creatures a little now, later you'll see me hit them much harder. Because they will offend me even more. Won't you then be much more distressed? Therefore, comply, otherwise you will force me not to tell you anything more, so as not to see you suffering, and thou shalt deprive me of the consolation of conversing with you. Ah! Yes! You will silence me, without anyone to entrust my suffering to." How bitter I felt when I heard these words! Wanting to distract me from my affliction, Jesus continued His presentation on hope by telling me, "My daughter, don't be troubled. Hope is peace. And as I dwell perfectly at peace when I exercise my righteousness, you must also remain at peace by immersing yourself in hope. The soul filled with hope that is saddened and troubled, resembles a person who, despite that it is rich in millions and that she be queen of several kingdoms, laments incessantly, saying, 'What am I going to live on? What will I dress in? Ah! I'm starving. I am so unhappy. I am getting poorer and miserable and I will die.' Suppose more that this person spends his days in uncleanliness, immersed in the deepest melancholy and that by seeing its treasures and browsing its properties, she grieves more when she thinks of her imminent death. Suppose again, that if she sees food, she refuses to take it, and only if someone tries to convince her that it is not possible, that it falls into misery. She does not let herself be convinced, and she continues to lament and feel sorry for her sad fate. What would people say about it? Surely she has lost her mind. However, it is possible that the curse that constantly worries her will occur. Here's how. In her madness, she could leave his kingdoms, abandon all its riches and go to foreign countries in the midst of barbarian peoples where no one would deign to give him a piece of bread. This is how his fantasy would become reality. What would have been wrong at the beginning would have become reality. But where to pinpoint the cause of this lamentable situation? Nowhere else but in the tortuous and stubborn will of this person. This is the behavior of the soul that voluntarily indulges in discouragement and welcomes the inner turmoil. This is the greatest madness. I said, "Ah, Lord, how can a soul always remain at peace by living in hope? If a soul makes a mistake, how can it be at peace?" He replied, "If the soul sins, it has already left the kingdom of hope. For sin and hope cannot coexist. Common sense says that we must preserve and develop what belongs to us. Is there a man who goes to his properties and burns everything he owns? Who does not jealously guard what belongs to him? None, I believe. Thus, the soul that lives in hope offends this virtue when it sins in a way, it burns its property. She is in the same mess as this person who abandons his property and went into exile in a foreign country. By sinning, and therefore by leaving Esperantus, which is none other than Jesus himself, the soul goes to the barbarians, that is, to the demons, which deprive it of any refreshment and feed it with the poison of sin. But what does hope, this soothing mother, do? Does she remain indifferent while the soul moves away from her? Oh, no. She screams, prays, calls the soul with her most tender voice. She goes before the soul and is satisfied only when she brings it back to her kingdom. My sweet Jesus added, the nature of hope is peace. What it is by nature, the soul that dwells within it acquires by grace. While he was transmitting these words to me out of intellectual light, he showed me what hope does for man by choosing the image of a mother. What a moving scene! If everyone could see this mother, even the most hardened hearts cry with contrition and would learn to love her to the point of not wanting to leave her maternal knees. As best I can, I will try to explain what I understood from this image. The man lived in chains, slave of the demon and condemned to eternal death, without hope of being able to access eternal life. All was lost and his destiny was ruined. A mother lived in heaven, united to the Father and the Holy Spirit, sharing with them an exquisite happiness. But she was not fully satisfied. She wanted around her all her children, her dear images, the most beautiful creatures that came out of God's hands. From the top of heaven, his eyes were fixed on lost humanity. She strove to find a way to save her beloved children and, aware that they could not in any way give satisfaction to the divinity by themselves, even at the cost of the greatest sacrifices because of their smallness compared to the greatness of God, what did this mother do? Seeing that the only way to save his children was to give his life for them, by marrying their sufferings and miseries and doing all that they should have done themselves, she presented herself in tears before the divinity. And, in her sweetest voice and with the most convincing motives dictated to her by her magnanimous heart, she said to him, I ask for mercy for my lost children. I cannot bear to see them separated from me. I want to save them at all costs. And since there is no other way than to give my life for them, I want to do it, as long as they find theirs. What do you expect from them? Repair? I will make reparations for them. Glory and honor? I will give you glory and honor in their name. Thanksgiving? I will give you thanks for them. Whatever you expect from them, I will give you, provided that they are allowed to reign at my side. Moved by the tears and love of this compassionate mother, the Godhead allowed himself to be convinced and felt inclined to love these children. Together, the divine persons looked into their misfortunes and accepted the sacrifice of this mother who will give full satisfaction to redeem them. As soon as the decree was signed, she immediately left heaven and went to earth, leaving behind her royal clothes. She clothed herself in human miseries like a miserable slave, and she lived in extreme poverty, in unprecedented suffering, in the midst of often unbearable beings. She only begged and interceded for her children. However, oh amazement, instead of welcoming with open arms the one who came to save them, these children did the opposite. No one wanted to welcome her or recognize her. On the contrary, they let her wander, despised her, and plotted to make her die. What did this tender mother do when she saw herself rejected by her ungrateful children? Has she given up? By no means. On the contrary, her love for them became more ardent, and she ran from place to place to gather them with her. How much effort she put in! She never stopped, always concerned about the salvation of her children. It provided for all their needs, remedied all their past ills, present and future. In short, she competed absolutely everything for the good of her children. And what did they do? Did they repent? Not at all. They looked at her with a menacing look, dishonored her with vile slander, overwhelmed her with opprobrium, flogged her until her body was no more than a living wound. Finally, they made her die the most infamous death, in the midst of spasms and extreme pain. And what did this mother do in the midst of so much suffering? Was she going to hate her unruly and arrogant children? Not at all. She loved them even more passionately, offered her sufferings for their salvation, and, taking his last breath, whispered to them a final word of peace and forgiveness. "O beautiful mother, O dear hope, how admirable you are! I love you so much. I beg you, always keep me on your lap and I will be the happiest person in the world." Even if I am determined not to speak of hope anymore, a voice resonates with me and tells me, hope contains all goods, present and future. And the soul that lives and grows on its lap will get everything. What does a soul desire? Glory, honors? Hope will give him the greatest glory and honors on this earth. And it will be glorified eternally in heaven. Does she desire wealth? This mother is extremely rich and, giving all her possessions to her children, its wealth does not diminish in any way. Moreover, its riches are eternal, not ephemeral. Does she desire pleasures, satisfactions? Hope possesses all the pleasures and satisfactions that are found in heaven and on earth. Anyone who feeds on her breast can revel in it to satiety. Moreover, as she is the master of masters, every soul who goes to his school will learn the science of true holiness. In short, hope gives us everything. If someone is weak, it strengthens him. For those who are in a state of sin, it has instituted the sacraments, among which is the bath where one can wash away one's sins. If we are hungry or thirsty, this compassionate mother gives us the most enticing and delicious food, her delicate flesh and her very precious blood. What more can this peaceful mother do? Who else looks like him? Ah! Only she was able to reconcile heaven and earth. Hope has united with faith and charity. It formed this indissoluble bond between human nature and divine nature. But who is this mother? It is Jesus Christ, our Savior. This morning, my sweet Jesus was not coming. I hadn't seen him since the night before when, suddenly, he showed himself in an appearance that aroused both pity and fear. He seemed to want to hide so as not to see the punishments he was going to hit people with, nor the means he would use to destroy them. My God, what a heartbreaking scene! While I was waiting for Jesus for a long time, I said to myself inwardly, why doesn't he come? Could it be because I do not comply with justice? So how do you do it? It's almost impossible for me to say, Fiat voluntas tua. I also thought, he doesn't come because the confessor doesn't send him. While I entertained such thoughts, I saw him as a shadow. He said to me, "Do not be afraid, the authority of priests is limited. As long as they are ready to beg me to come to you and to offer you as a victim so that you may suffer so that I may spare the people, I will spare them themselves when I send the punishments. On the other hand, if they show no interest, in my turn, I will have no regard for them." Then he disappeared, leaving me in a sea of affliction and tears. After very bitter days of deprivation, I felt exhausted. However, I continually offered my sufferings by saying to Jesus, "Lord, you know what it costs me to be deprived of you. But I resign myself to your most holy will. I offer you this suffering as proof of my love and, also, to soothe you. I present her to you as a messenger of praise and reparations. For me and for all your creatures. That's all I own and I offer it to you. Being convinced that you accept the sacrifices of good will offered without reservation. But please come, for I can't take it any more. I am often tempted to comply with justice, believing that my refusals are the cause of his absence. In fact, Jesus told me lately that if I didn't conform, he would be forced not to come and tell me nothing more, to avoid hurting me. But I don't have the heart to do it, especially since obedience doesn't require it. In the midst of my bitterness, a light caught my eye. Then a voice whispered in my ear. To the extent that men meddle in the things of the world, they lose the esteem of eternal goods. I have given them riches to serve in their sanctification. But they used it to offend me and to make idols of it. So I'm going to destroy them and their riches. Then I saw my dearest Jesus. He was so suffering and outraged because of the men that it was painful to see. I said to him, "Lord, I offer you your wounds, your blood, and the most holy use you have made of your senses during your mortal life in reparation for the offenses that are done to you. Especially the misuse that creatures make of their senses." In a serious tone, he said to me, "Do you know what happened to the senses of creatures? They are like roars of ferocious animals, which prevent men from approaching. The rot and the multitude of sins that spring from their senses force me to flee from them." I said, "Ah, Lord, how indignant you seem. If you want to keep sending them punishments, then I want to join you. Otherwise, I wish to leave this state. Why stay there since I can no longer offer myself as a victim to save men?" Then, in an irritated tone, he said to me, "You want both extremes. Or that you demand that I do nothing. Or that you want to join me. Are you not satisfied that men have been spared in part? Do you think that the city of Corrado is the best and the one that offends me the least? That I have spared it in preference to so many others, is that an insignificant thing? So be happy, calm down, and while I chastise people, accompany me with your desires and sufferings, praying that these punishments will lead people to convert." Jesus continues to manifest himself with a grieving air. When he arrived, he threw himself into my arms, completely exhausted and looking for consolation. He shared with me some of his sufferings and said to me, "My daughter, the way of the cross is dotted with stars. For those who borrow it, these stars turn into very bright suns. Imagine the eternal happiness of the soul that will be surrounded by these suns. The reward I give to the cross is so great that it cannot be measured. This is almost inconceivable to the human mind. For carrying crosses is not human, everything is divine. This morning, my adorable Jesus came. He carried me out of my body in the middle of a crowd. He seemed to look at the creatures with compassion. I felt like the punishments he gave them arose from his infinite mercy and gushed from his heart. Turning to me, he said to me, "My daughter, the divinity is nourished by the pure and reciprocal love that unites the three divine persons. Man, on the other hand, is a product of this love. It is, so to speak, a particle of their food. But this particle has become bitter. For, in moving away from God, many men have given themselves up in pasture to the infernal flames fueled by the relentless hatred of demons. Who are the main enemies of God and men? He added. The loss of souls is the main reason for my deep sadness, for souls belong to me. On the other hand, what compels me to chastise men is the infinite love that I have for them and that desires that all be saved. I said, Ah! Lord, it seems to me that you speak only of punishments. In your omnipotence, you probably have other ways to save souls. Anyway, if I were sure that all suffering would fall on them and that you would not suffer from it yourself, I would resign myself to it. But I see that you suffer a lot because of these punishments. What will happen if you pour out even more? He replied. Even if I suffer from it, love pushes me to send even heavier tribulations. For, in order to bring men into themselves, there is no more powerful way than to break them. It turns out that the other means make them even more arrogant. Therefore, abide by my righteousness. I can see that your love for me pushes you to refuse to conform and that you do not have the heart to see me suffer. My mother loved me much more than any other creature. His love was second to none. However, to save souls, she went to in conformity with justice and resigned to see me suffer a lot. If my mother did that, couldn't you do it too? As Jesus spoke like this, I felt my will draw closer to his to the point that I could hardly help but conform to his righteousness. I didn't know what to say, so convinced I was. But I still did not show my adherence to Jesus. It disappeared and I remained in doubt as to whether or not I would comply. My most sweet Jesus almost always manifests himself in the same way. This morning he told me, my daughter, my love for creatures is so great that it resonates like an echo in the celestial spheres, fills the atmosphere and spreads all over the earth. How do creatures respond to this echo of love? Ah! They answer me with a poisoned echo, filled with all kinds of sins. An almost deadly echo, likely to hurt me. But I will reduce the population of the earth, so that this poisoned echo no longer pierces my ears. I said, Ah! What do you say, Lord? He said, I act like a compassionate doctor, who uses radical remedies to treat his children covered with wounds. What does this doctor father do who loves his children more than his own life? Will he let these wounds become gangrenous? Will he let his children die rather than care for them, under the pretext that they could suffer if he used fire or scalpel? Never. Even if, for him, it is as if he applied these treatments on his own body, he does not hesitate to cut and open the flesh, then apply counter-poison or fire to prevent them from becoming more infected. If it happens that some of his children die during the intervention, this is not what the Father wants. He wants to heal them. So it is for me. I hurt my children in order to heal them. I destroy them in order to resurrect them. If many of them get lost, that is not my will. It is the consequence of their wickedness and stubborn will. It is because of this poisoned echo that they spread, until they eventually self-destruct. I resumed, Tell me, my only good, how can I soften for you this poisoned echo that afflicts you so much? He replied, The only way is to perform your actions solely for the purpose of pleasing me. That all your senses and strengths be applied only to love and glorify me. May each of your thoughts, words etc. be filled with love for me. Thus, your echo will rise to my throne and will be sweet music for my ear. This morning, my kind Jesus arrived surrounded by light. He looked at me as if he was penetrating me entirely. So I felt all wiped out. He said to me, Who am I and who are you? These words penetrated me to the marrow of my bones. I saw the enormous distance between infinity and the finite, between whole and nothing. I could also see the malice of this nothing and how deep it was in the mud. I saw that my soul was swimming in the middle of rot. in the middle of worms and many other horrible things. Oh! My God, what an awful sight! My soul wanted to flee the gaze of the God 3 times holy, but he held me back with these other words. What is my love for you and how do you love me in return? While following the first question, I was frightened and wanted to flee. After the second, what is my love for you? I felt immersed, surrounded on all sides by her love, becoming aware that my existence resulted from it and that, if this love ended, I would no longer exist. I had the impression that the beating of my heart, my intelligence and even my breathing were the product of that love. I was swimming in him and, if I had wanted to flee, it would have been impossible for me because this love totally enveloped me. My own love seemed to me to be just a small drop of water thrown into the sea, which disappears and can no longer be distinguished. So many things I understood, but it would be too long to say everything. Then Jesus disappeared, leaving me perplexed. I saw myself all filled with sins. In my heart, I implored his forgiveness and mercy. Soon after, he came back and said to me, "My daughter, when a soul is convinced that it has done evil by offending me, it already fulfills the office of Mary Magdalene who washed my feet with his tears, the anointed with its perfume and dried them with his hair." When the soul begins to examine his consciousness, recognizes and regrets the harm she has done, she prepares a bath for my wounds. Seeing her sins, a taste of bitterness invades her and she regrets them. This is how she comes to anoint my wounds with the most exquisite balm. Subsequently, she wants to repair. Seeing her past ingratitude, a surge of love for her God so good rises in her. And she would like to give him her life to prove her love. It's her hair that binds her to me like gold chains. My adorable Jesus continues to come. This morning, as soon as he arrived, he took me in his arms and carried me out of my body. In this embrace, I understood several things. Especially since it is absolutely essential to strip yourself of everything. If you want rest freely in the arms of the Lord and to be able to enter and leave his heart with ease and at will so as not to become a burden for him. Then, with all my heart, I said to him, "My dear and only good, I ask you to strip me of everything, for I see that to be clothed in you, to live in you and that you may live in me. There must not be the slightest thing in me that does not belong to you." Full of benevolence, he answered me, "My daughter, so that I can come to dwell in a soul, the main thing is, let it be totally detached from all things. Without it, not only I cannot dwell in her, but no virtue can settle in it. As soon as the soul has stripped itself of everything, I enter it. And with it, we build a house. Foundations are based on humility. The deeper they are, the stronger and higher the walls will be. The walls are made of the stones of mortification. And they are cemented with the pure gold of charity. When the walls are erected, I, like an expert painter, apply an excellent paint made up of the merits of my passion and beautiful colors provided by my blood. This paint serves as protection against rain, snow, and any shock. Then come the doors. For them to be solid like wood and preserved against termites, it takes silence that kills the outside senses. To protect this house, you need a guardian who watches over everything, inside and out. It is the fear of God that protects against all weather. The fear of God will be the guardian of the house, prompting the soul to act. Not for fear of being punished, but for fear of offending the master of the house. This holy fear should only serve to incite the soul to do everything to please God and nothing else. This house will have to be decorated. Treasures formed by holy desires and tears. Such were the treasures of the Old Testament. In the fulfillment of their wishes, they found consolation in suffering, they found strength. They bet everything on the expectation of the Redeemer to come from this point of view, they were athletes. A soul without desire is almost dead. Everything annoys her and makes her sullen, including the virtues. She loves absolutely nothing and walks in the path of good, dragging herself. For the soul filled with desires, it is quite the opposite. Nothing weighs on him, everything is joy. She has wings and appreciates everything, even suffering. Desired things are loved. In magnets, we find his delights. Even before the house is built, one must maintain the desire. The most expensive gemstones of my life were formed by suffering, pure suffering. Since the sole host of this house will be the giver of all good, he invests it with all the virtues. He perfumes her with the sweetest smells. Beautiful flowers give off their fragrance. He resonates a celestial melody of the most pleasant. It breathes an air of paradise. I omitted to say that we must ensure that domestic peace reigns, that is, that we observe the recollection and inner silence of the senses. Then I remained in the arms of our Lord and was completely stripped. Having seen that the confessor was present, Jesus said to me, but I thought he was having fun. My daughter, you have stripped yourself of everything, and you know that when a soul is so stripped, she needs someone to clothe, feed and house her. Where do you want to live? In the arms of the confessor or in mine? In saying this, he placed me in the arms of the confessor. I started by resisting, but he told me it was his will. After a short discussion, he said, "Don't be afraid, I'm holding you in my arms." Then it was peace. This morning, my benevolent Jesus arrived all afflicted. The first words he addressed to me were, "Poor Rome, what destruction you will experience. Looking at you, I cry." He said this with such tenderness that I was moved. But I didn't know if it was just the people of this city or its buildings as well. As I had been ordered not to conform to justice, but to pray. I say to Jesus, "My beloved Jesus, when it comes to chastisements, it is not time to discuss, but only to pray." So I began to pray, to kiss his wounds and to do acts of reparation. As I prayed, he would tell me from time to time, "My daughter, don't rape me. By doing this, you employ violence against me. So, calm down." I replied, "Lord, it is obedience that wants it this way, not me." He added, "The river of iniquities is so great that it seriously hinders the salvation of souls. Only prayer and my wounds can prevent this impetuous river from engulfing them all." Jesus in Luisa, October 28, 1899. My daughter, when a soul is convinced that it has done evil by offending me, it already fulfills the office of Mary Magdalene who washed my feet with his tears, the anointed with its perfume and dried with her hair. When the soul begins to examine his consciousness, recognizes and regrets the renal she has made, she prepares a bath for wounds. Seeing her sins, a taste of bitterness invades her and she regrets them. This is how she comes to anoint my wounds with the most exquisite balm. Subsequently, she wants to repair. Seeing her past ingratitude, an outpouring of love for her God so good rises in her. And she would like to give him her life to prove her love. It's her hair that binds her to me like gold chains.